Brother Yossi, are you ready to go?
Yeah. Yep. Ready to rock and roll, bro.
Perfect. All right. Well, welcome everyone to Trust Medicine People's Visionary Gathering. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are, and thank you for all of you for being here. It's truly a privilege to gather with like-minded individuals as part of the Trust Medicine People community, a space where purpose, healing, and empowerment take center stage. At Trust Medicine People, our mission is rooted in fostering holistic freedom and transformation. Through our core offering, we've introduced fully customizable hybrid trusts that not only offer financial security and growth, but also provide the foundation for spiritual edification. These trusts are designed to help individuals uncover and live out their true purpose, empowering them to thrive in all aspects of life. Now, recognizing the critical role that financial wellness plays in a personal and collective empowerment, Trust Medicine People also specializes in credit repair and business funding, and an A to Z solution to assist our community in bringing dreams into the waking world. By helping individuals and businesses access the resources that they need, we pave the way for greater opportunities and long-term success. Now, looking forward to the future, we are committed to creating healing sanctuaries, sacred spaces where ancient plant medicines and non-traditional curative healing modalities blend with the modern techniques to facilitate deep personal transformation. These sanctuaries will serve as hubs for healing, reflection, and growth, embodying our belief in the power of reconnection to the earth, to tribe, and to one's inner self. Furthermore, as part of Trust Medicine People's grand vision and aligned with the big dream we all share, we are collaborating with green tech partners to establish self-sustained regenerative agroforestry systems in underserved and third world areas. We aim to restore ecosystems, uplift communities, and create pathways to sustainable living for future generations. This gathering is more than a meeting. It's a step toward creating a world that reflects our shared values of trust, healing, and regenerative growth. Together, we're building a future where empowerment meet real-world solutions. So welcome everyone again to Trust Medicine People, where your journey to liberation, healing, and contribution begins. So let's go ahead and get started. Yossi, my brother.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody, for being on the call. If you're new to this call, we are not attorneys. We're not CPAs. We're not giving you guys financial advice or telling you how to do anything where we would need some kind of certification to be able to do that legally. We are more like a church than anything. We do operate through a trust framework, the same framework that we offer to others, some people who share our dreams and whatnot. And that being said, that's pretty much the disclaimer. We do claim all natural and unalienable rights that are granted to us by our Creator. And with that being said, no topic is off limits. Please feel free to bring anything to our attention. We ask that, if you're not speaking, that you kindly mute your mic just to avoid the feedback. At the same time, we try to have as much decorum as possible in these discussions. We're all friends here. We're all one big tribe. So consider this family. At the same time, if something gets too personal or if there's a discussion that might require a little bit more private consulting, please feel free to reach out to us, anybody on our team on the back end, and we can schedule a private consult to be able to dive deep into those personal matters. That being said, welcome everybody, and let's have some fun. Mr. James.
Okay, so I like to thank everyone for being here. Typically, what we do is we answer questions based around the things that we're doing in regards to trusts, medicine, healing. There's a bunch of different topics that we go off of. I like to start the conversation because it's just me opening up the floor. So basically, I have a question regarding UCC filings. Now, the scenario is that let's say I have a predatory lender that we gave lending to one of my clients, and basically their terms didn't specify certain hidden adders in there, or I guess what I'm saying is that they're stealing money. They're not really being transparent about what they're offering people, for the financing. So since they're not being transparent about it, is it possible to get rid of that debt through a UCC filing, and how does that work?
Absolutely, brother. It's a great question. Mr. Dennis, if you wouldn't mind muting your mic, getting a little bit of feedback back there.
Well, yeah, I'm about to, fortunately, I can't stay and I want to bloody listen to what you say about this question. Are you
Mhm.
recording this?
Oh yeah, absolutely, bro. You can always go to the YouTube channel, Trust Medicine People, and you can listen to not only the shorts, but the full chats. Every single open mic that we do is going to be on there.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Well, I'm going to be taken off, and I just posted up something about what you're just about to talk about, the codes and stuff like that, on how to deal with problems like what you're just talking about.
Yep. So yeah, feel free, either you can mute the mic, you can hop off, it's okay. You can always come back and you can listen to the answer on the back end, okay? Nice having you on the call though, bro. Mr. James, that question is a question that, if most people knew how to handle debt and how to actually position themselves beforehand, we wouldn't be getting into any of this mess with predatory lending and people who are essentially being parasitic and taking advantage of others. In order to do a proper, I know there's a lot of videos out there, a lot of TikToks, a lot of information, and people often give a portion of it without giving the whole thing. And I'm a little bit hesitant because here's another disclaimer. It is not the full process that I'm about to lay out. It's just pretty much the outline. So anytime that there's any kind of an alleged debt being requested, right, for you're being essentially summoned to pay that debt for one reason or the other. And summons can just be through a paperwork, through a debt collector, through just a request. This is your statement, please pay it. And then that can escalate. The thing that you want to do in your situation, brother, is you always want to be able to perfect that security interest in the end with that UCC filing, which is essentially putting a lien on them so that you're first in line and first paid. At the same time, in order to be able to do that, you're going to need a judgment. And you can get a judgment from a judge. You can take somebody into a small claims court very easily if you've dialed in a nice administrative process where you've given them some kind of notice. You put them on notice, you give them the timeline, and then you tell them what is necessary for them to comply and comport with what timeline you're giving them and the information that you're requesting, right? So a lot of times what that's going to look like is, depending on the lender that you're working with, it could just be that you're requesting just the gap accounting. You want to see both sides of the books. You want to see where a loan was actually made and that they have a debt on the other side. There rarely will you get that. The other thing that you would want to ask in a debt validation letter would be some kind of proof of the original purchase agreement and that your signature is on that agreement. And you would probably want to include in the letter something to the effect of, well, I realize that, and this is just to let them know that you're serious. I realize that whenever we're dealing with securities, which is what this would be, that it's confidential by nature. And because of that confidentiality, also recognize that this is not a discussion that you can have openly. So that, combined with the fact that I have a forensic accountant friend and a handwriting analysis expert that I know, and we would love to come into your office in person and inspect the original note with the wet ink signature. Now that right there gets them out of the loop. The loop of deniability, or whatever you want to call it, or the shystering on the back end is essentially just, it's a product of the system itself. It's actually become the default mainstream way of doing business, right? So they're taking any promissory note or any contract that you signed that was an extension of your credit, and they're taking that to the Federal Reserve window and essentially pledging it for some kind of loan, right? And this is where a lot of people get this situation a little bit mixed up. They're not getting paid. There is no payment. It's not like that. They're getting a loan. They know better than to get paid. If they got paid, it would be a taxable event. If they get a loan, you can't tax debt. You can't tax any kind of equity that you could accrue through debt. You see what I'm saying? I'm going to loop right back around. The private administrative process that you would have to use in order to be able to foreclose on them would essentially be one letter with the things that I mentioned, requesting that they respond accurately, timely, within 30 days. Couple it with an affidavit showing that you're a living man coming in through the agency and the capacity of whomever you are in that business structure, right? So that they can see the differentiation right there. Now, that letter, the 30-day letter, if you write a self-executing letter, you want to tell them this is a notice of intent to sue. And because of that, you only have 30 days. Don't expect further correspondence from me. But if you want to do it the proper way, it's, hey, listen, you have 30 days to produce this information. 15 days later, you send them a notice and you have 15 days, same notice. And then the third notice that you send them is 3 days before you default on them. And at that point, you'd have your paperwork in order so that you could bring them into the small claims court, get some kind of judgment against them and a default. And then you can turn around and do that UCC filing statement where you lien them up. And that's how you perfect the security interest. But you first got to get a judge to sign off on it. And it's not as hard as you would think it is, especially in a small claims court where you can represent yourself and you can speak just like you and I are doing right now. No fancy paperwork necessary. While the court moves through paperwork, in a small claims court, it's a little bit different. The paperwork is actually created from the movement of the people. And because of that, and because of two little things, one of them is called stare decisis, and the other is res judicata. And essentially combined those two elements of law and the legal standing that you have essentially mean that once you get a ruling in a small claims court, you can bump it up to a district court and you can leverage that ruling in order to be able to seek damages.
Got you. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense with the debt, and them going to the Federal Reserve window, pulling it through your name. And I understand the process as well, because, we kind of went through that on the back end, but, that's definitely the right way to go about it. So that's my question for today. As of right now, the floor is open for questions relating to this or other things. I know, Carter, you might have had some questions as well, if nobody has anything to ask, but, everybody feel free to ask questions and see, because Yosi has answers here. Thank you, Yosi.
Yeah, thanks, James. We appreciate it, brother. I think Carter did have a few questions regarding trusts. Carter, if you want to go ahead and address those. Okay.
Sorry, I had to find my unmute button. So how does a trust differ from a will?
That's a great question, bro. Well, ideally, you'll have an estate plan, right? And that estate plan will essentially contain a trust, like the ones that we design. There are 10 plus attachments sometimes that come with a core document that can be 30 to 40 pages long, depending on who you are and what your needs are. So that actual trust documentation, it essentially creates an entity. And then that entity is the entity through the private as a nation of one and a church of one at first, until you have partners and whatnot. That thing right there can operate in the private. Now, it can also operate in the public. Now, we have a trust here at play. That trust right there is the centerpiece. The will is the thing that connects to the trust. The will is a public-facing document that isn't revealed until a person or a grantor dies. And at that point, then a judge will see if it's going into a trust, if the will is properly set up, like a pour over will, like the ones that we do, then, we're taking everything that could possibly be associated with interest on the public side, and we're conveying it into the trust. And then we're using whatever's left over because of the insurance account that was created on that employee, essentially. And we're taking all of that and using it to discharge, because those transmitting utilities, that SESTA QV, the social security number plus the birth certificate, that entity that was created through the implied contract, that thing right there contains a lot of abandoned credits when you die. So if your will is properly structured, then you would convey all of those credits, and then any liability that was left over, you would continue to take those credits and use them as a discharge tool to be able to, make sure that your family didn't have to foot the bill for your hospital stay or whatever it was, right? And then whoever your alleged creditors were, they know how to write the stuff off and how to get tax credits for it. So I know that that's a little bit left field and right field, but as far as the difference between the will and the trust, that will can be a public side facing document, and it often is 98% of the cases. And the trust itself is a thing that you want to always add on to a will so that you have a place to convey your interest. Because if you're not doing that, then you're just essentially creating a taxable event with your will where you're passing on something that either has capital gains associated with it or some kind of liability associated with it from one public entity to another. And you don't really want to do that unless you have to. It's fine to keep the state out of your affairs, to make sure that your estate doesn't pass through probate, but still it does. It gets right to the door of the probate, and then they see if you have a will, they just honor will. And if the will conveys everything into a trust, then double honor right there, right? I hope that
Still there, Carter?
That I am.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Yossi, your the trusts that are established, the will and testament is provided in that trust. So someone, if they were to want that included in that, that's something that is included.
Yeah, we always include some kind of pour over will. That is how we do it. We want to make sure that everybody gets a full estate plan and the minutes, the record of minutes, all of the schedules, all of the annex materials, the addendums. And then what I do is every time we have a potential connection to someone, say, that can get us frontline grant acquisition, then I would work up a series of codicils that would essentially allow for whatever entity that we created through that trust framework to be able to get that frontline grant acquisition privilege, right? And then I would auto update it. And that's pretty much what I've been doing, is just sending people out, here's a codicil. And we've got another big one coming up, hopefully within the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Perfect, brother. So basically, it's a one-stop shop, whole package deal.
Full package, lifetime deal, no strings.
Okay. Yeah, we'll possibly go over some of those touch on those trade secrets here in the near future. But Carter, did you have any more questions, brother?
Yeah, well, he did answer because another question I had was how does the trust maintain privacy compared to a will? But let's say I create a trust and I appointed trustees. What would happen if those trustees were unable or unwilling to serve?
Well, we have provisions and clauses that are very thoroughly dialed in to be able to at least allot for what are the protocols during such an event. And the trust, ideally, if you read it through several times, you'll see that it reads as an instruction manual. So it does contain all of this information. And there are successor trustees that you can appoint and so on. But I mean, coming out the gate, if you don't know anybody that you can trust, you're the principal trustee. You were the grantor until you conveyed all your interest into the trust. Now you're the principal trustee, just managing the affairs of the trust and being the chairman of a board of trustees that governs those affairs, right? And you do it all for the beneficiary. But the way that we really like to set trusts up is the beneficiary should always be your dream. Whatever your dream is, it should definitely benefit from your death, meaning your whole life's purpose, right?
Well, then, and that being said, would I be a part of that dream while I'm living?
You're the one that's driving the car, right? If the dream is the car while you're living, this is the inter vivos structure. It means, while it's living, this is a living trust. It just like any life insurance policies that are put into it aren't death insurance. They're life insurance. They're meant to be leveraged and used to expand and grow the trust and the dream. So who better to know what that dream is than the original grantor, who takes that hat off the minute that they sign the paperwork and puts the trustee hat on. And then from that point, you're just a 24/7 at-will volunteer employee of the dream.
Yeah, if no one's driving the vehicle, right?
Right, absolutely. But the thing that we like to do is be able to drive the vehicle 24/7, 365. So often that takes a team. So you put together a board of trustees and you make sure that each one of those trustees are appointed with specific duties and obligations, and that they can only, you put the guardrails up. You don't want to just appoint a trustee and give them the same power that the chairman has. And while the chairman, and then we create a structure where we insulate ourselves from ourselves, essentially, because if you're the chairperson, the chairwoman, or the chairman of a board of trustees that governs the affairs for the beneficiary, which is your dream, or the dream or the contract that you have with your creator, then the only person that's really capable of saying we're going here is you. But at the same time, you need a whole board, you need a team, so people can, drive the whole way.
Yeah, no one likes having to pull over and take naps trying to get to that destination.
No, sir. No, sir. Yep. Exponential growth here.
Yep, absolutely. Carter, did you have any more, brother?
No, not right now.
Okay, perfect. Yossi, what I want to touch base on a little bit here, as this vehicle that we're speaking of, and an A to Z service to, get someone on that path of their dreams, and us realizing the, the financial aspect of things and how important it is. Money makes the world go round, and it's very difficult to, get on the road if it's not paved. And in order to pave that road, it takes a little moolah. So
Absolutely.
a little bit about, helping with finances to be able to empower someone to get on that road and on that path and on their vision, so they're always looking in that windshield instead of the rear view, right?
Correct. Yep. That we always like to get people on that fast track, and ideally we can get them in the left lane in the States. And I don't know what the fast lane is in other countries, but yep, absolutely. We do like to make this as streamlined as possible. As far as the financial technology and the trade secrets that are embedded into the trust, there are many. And ultimately, this is a manumitting vehicle. Manumission was the process of freeing a slave, specifically the paperwork that was accompanied to that slave being free, going from being in chains to being a free man who could walk around with papers that would identify them. And this is what we're after right here. And while it's not just the trust documentation is the core of it. Now, all of the other adjuncts and the A to Z process that we've created along the way is because some people can't afford the trust price point. And if you can't afford the trust price point, then you can't really fund your dream. So we recognize that. So, we're willing to take a bum on the street who has a dream that is powerful but can't rub two pennies together, and is willing to work at it and willing to learn and willing to come onto these calls and, willing to ask questions and so on. And we can take them through our A to Z system, get their credit cleaned up, make sure that all of their paperwork is right so that anything that they do pops off the page, and then get them a business. That's something that aligns with what their trust will be in service to. And then we create the trust abstract and the certificate on the front side before we even start the process, so that they can go ahead and they can get an LLC, and they can get everything that they would need to be able to secure business funding to the tune of, right now we're looking at 100K. Pretty much, we don't like to use the term guaranteed because nothing in this life is guaranteed, but it's spot on. And we work with the best. Thank you, Mr. Oz, for vetting so many amazing people. We don't really necessarily care. Of course, we're looking for the most proficient people possible and the most efficient people possible. But at the same time, if they don't align with the dream and they don't align with something greater than service to themselves, then we'll step away from a pile of cash.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. I don't know who the gorilla is. They have a very, very important question, and we're gonna address that, brother or sister, shortly here. What I'd like to do is, we recognize that going into the private sector, right, via the trust, that's our end game. That's the goal for everybody. We want everybody to be on that private sector. So basically, you're unfuckwithable, right? But we do understand and recognize that there's also a public sector that we can take advantage of to start fueling that private side. All right. So you'll see what I'm gonna do, if you don't mind, is I'm just gonna rapid fire you a few questions regarding that public side path. If you could just go ahead and rapid fire those answers back, we'll get through this really quick, and then we'll open the floor up.
Yeah, and then let's bounce to the gorilla, and then let's open the floor up.
Yep, absolutely. Regarding credit repair, real quick, what is your process for disputing negative things on the report?
Listen, I don't have time to be able to, be corresponding with data furnishers and whatnot. We've outsourced that product. That is something that, while we do it in-house, it's only for special cases. It's not for everyday use. The everyday, we don't like to give a baby a butcher knife. Everyday use stuff, we do have the experts in the field that we connect you to, and they are a part of our team.
Yeah, so asking that question was more of a vague question. For each individual, there is going to be a different approach, and it really just depends on your situation. So moving forward, then, how long does it typically take to see improvements on your score?
Well, it could be 30 days. It could be a week even. If you approach it correctly, it could be within 24 hours. You can call them up right now. And if you know what to say and who to connect to, you can get it removed within 15 minutes. At the same time, most people within 90 days.
Yep. So yeah, within our process and our specialists, certified specialists, we see basically a full sweep within that 90-day period. A lot of things are going to come off. Roughly 50% of what's on your report in a negative manner will come off in the first 30 days, and then it takes another 30 to 60 days to clean the rest of it up. But it is very proficient, and this is definitely a quick route. There's a lot of guys out there. It could take 6 to 9 months. But we kind of figured out a way to kind of bully them a little bit, coming more like a bulldog versus just standard repair agencies sending in dispute letters, and then you get stall letters back, and you got to resend, and that could take a long time. And we realized that some people they want to get going with their dreams right now. So what we had to do is find the best that can really get this kick started for our people. So we work with all three bureaus, obviously, and then Yossi, what is more important than just the standard 3 bureaus?
Data furnishers, Innovis, Check Systems, LexisNexis, yada, yada, right? And they go on and on. They're the ones that actually hold the data, and they're the ones that the quote-unquote credit bureaus are checking with to be able to verify the data. Now, whenever you send somebody a debt validation letter, expect them to verify it according to the statements that they've sent you in the mail. And they'll send you a big stack of statements. That's a good thing, guys. That's a great thing. Because if you set yourself up right and you're not afraid of a pro se litigation process and creating your own private administrative process to be able to default on them, that right there is it damages.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Looks like we were going to answer this question for. There he is. Okay, never mind. Do we provide any kind of credit education strategies to maintain a high credit score and build a positive profile?
Sure. Come on the open mics.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Are we compliant with the Credit Repair Organizations Act?
Yes.
Okay. And then as far as the charge, it's not a lot. We don't need to go over pricing right now, but it is definitely a little cheaper than what you're normally going to find. So
Yeah.
sorry,
It's about a 10% entry fee, and then we get you rocking and rolling toward that trust documentation, and then that is the core that will take your dream off.
Absolutely. So within the process, you will get updates every 30 days, or you can check your own. It's pretty easy, but a lot of people just want to get an email and with a quick progress update. And then we do help build the positive credit in addition to repairing the negative. So that's pretty much it for the credit repair stuff. And then for business funding, what types of funding do we offer, Yossi? Loans, lines of credit, grants, venture capital?
Right now, we're in the process right now of being able to bootstrap somebody's dream without any kind of liability, which essentially is grants. That's the primary gateway in there. And as soon as we get that locked up, and like I said, we'll send codicils out to everybody that already has trust documentation, and it will be embedded in all future trust documentation. And that'll be frontline access to those that grant acquisition. However, we have to get there. And then from there, credit is probably the easiest thing to clean up. And credit cards are, while they can be destructive, can be used and leveraged to be able to create more volume, and then the volume of transactions that are paid on time in a timely way, and then leaving them maybe 1 to 3% on the back end just to chew on to keep that profile sexy for the alleged lender. That right there is a great process. We like you said, we start by flatlining the credit report if needed, and then we start tacking stuff onto it, and we zoom.
Yep. So yeah, as of right now, you know, we're working on the grant end of things to like you said, really bootstrap it. And you know, as a grant is something, here's a grant, and you know, good luck type deal. We're as of right now, we're working with lines of credit, and Yossi mentioned that number, $100,000. That's about the average amount. And you know, if you only need 50, you can get 50. If you only need 25, you can get 25. If you need $300,000, that's when we just, you know, go to different a larger array of banks. And we can also obtain more funding. So it's not capped at 100,000 necessarily, but 100,000 is a good start for most people to start feeling that dream. So to improve chances of getting approved for business funding and working, a lot of people, well, do I need an existing business? We actually, you can start with a startup, with a brand new LLC, no documentation, no income reporting, no tax returns, none of that. We have it dialed in to where you can just basically go grab an LLC and get rocking and rolling, as long as the your private or personal public side, that credit is cleaned up and in a positive fashion. And you can start with a fresh LLC. You don't need existing. A lot of guys with funding agencies, they're going to want, you know, a year in business, 3 years in business. So they want those tax returns. They want proof of income. And we don't need any of that. So we've actually found a way to just start fresh and get rocking and rolling. Typical interest rates on repaying those terms, what we found is roughly 18 months at 0%. And assistance with preparing business plans and financial projections for the loan application. We do that as well. That's all fully covered when we go through and talk about, you know, we get to know you and we go through all of that. And basically, you know, the A to Z thing, we do this. This is all basically done for you. There's a little bit of work you got to do, but it's not a whole lot. Risk associated with any of the options that we recommend, I'll take that. You'll see the only risk really associated is not getting started. You know, once you get capital, if you're just going to sit on it, well, that's probably not ideal, because you know, you wait so long, then there's interest and such. So as soon as you get funding, we want to have that projection lined up. You get your trust, and you get started. You know, you hop in that vehicle and you get started.
Yep, you get the trust, and then we have, you know, you embed a life insurance policy for about half the capital, and you just got everything back. Because if you use a single premium policy that's embedded into the trust and the policy is structured correctly, you can take 50 of that 100, dump it right into the policy. Instantly, the trust is valuated in excess of the 100 that you originally got. Now you have 50 to play with.
Yeah, so it's basically a guaranteed compound rate on your value, the trust reservation value. So to take advantage of the public side, work it into the private side, the private sector, and we're able to just compound and compound. And you can do this infinitely. It's basically infinite banking. You're your own bank. A little different than secured party crediting. They go through a lot of different weird stuff. You know, we're just cut and dry, straight. You know, we're traveling down the road. We don't want to take all these curves and risk falling off the mountain. We just want a nice, easy, straight, flat road. Just set your cruise control and go. So yeah, I don't think there's too many other basic questions for funding, unless somebody has any. But what I would like to do here is get back to this very important question here with we'll just call them Gorilla. Gorilla asks, can you draft a trust where my children can be in school but not be able to be kidnapped by CPS? Can one put one's children in a trust?
Beautiful, powerful question. Any mother would, you know, that is the question that they need answered. And yes, the short answer, here's the short and long of it. Yes, right, that's the short. The long of it, it gets very complex, and it depends on the situation that the family is, the family unit. How stable is the family unit? Can you, if the mother is if the mother's abusing some kind of substance and is detrimental to the children, well, then you probably don't want to create, you know, baby with a butcher knife here, right? You don't want to create a structure where the mother can say, that is my biological material, I own it forever. And you definitely don't want to do it if you have any kind of parent that could possibly abuse that, right? At the same time, I hear a lot of fathers say, well, I tried this, I tried that, and that bitch and this, and they get very as men, we get very animated, and when we're angry, we are a threat. We're a threat to ourselves. We're a threat to the women that are around us, that love us, that raised us, that put up with our bullshit and all this stuff. To get back to the main point, though, any mother who's carried a child for however many months knows that that is you. There is no differentiation. And while a man can support you through that and can make sure that he does his best to be that hunter bringing home the meat every day, or the flowers, or whatever it is that you require for sustenance, that's a man's job. The woman's job is to empower the man. Where that dissolves is usually where one of these contracts that you're talking about right now would be needed. That, or a situation like you're saying with CPS, where the state comes in, claims ownership over the child. They're not actually claiming ownership over the child, the living child. What they're claiming ownership over is that SESTA-QV trust entity, the social security number, that is the thing that perfects it. But if it's a child, it might not have a social security number. So now we're talking about a birth certificate, which was the thing that created it, not the certificate itself. The certificate is just it's a reflection, and it's pretty much like a, hey, here you go. Thanks for signing the employee up for the corporation to be a full-time employee. And by the way, we need to get your signature and the footprints of the baby, because and the umbilical cord also, so that we can have some kind of piece of biological material that we attach to this instrument that we're creating. And we're going to essentially put an insurance contract on their head, where on their death, and we all die, and insurance actuaries have measured this stuff. They've dialed it down to the T. They know how much every single one of their chattel is worth. And when you're born into this system, you are chattel. The thing is, you're chattel only on paper. This is why I call these dead entities. And I know that a lot of people, that brings some kind of resistance, right? Because the more accurate term is artificial entity. It's artificial. It was created on paper. It doesn't live. It can't breathe. It can't do shit. It can't do the things that it can't love. It can't do that kind of stuff, right? All it can possibly do is interact with other artificial entities through paper. So that entity that was created, the reason I call it dead is because it doesn't contain life unless a living being animates it and works through it. But here's the thing. That's the default contract that we've been given when we come through. And because that's the default contract that we've been given, it's the only thing, just through sheer ignorance. And ignorance isn't always bad, it just means that maybe the truth has been obfuscated or hidden from people in such a way that not only that, but life is challenging enough. Who has time to research this kind of stuff but me, right? I mean, in reality. So more back to the point, you absolutely can draft a trust that can commandeer all of those entities that were created, and also the biological material of the mother, so that biological material itself is the thing. And now with a trust like that, what I would do is there would be a private document that would be extensive. It would probably approach something in the 45 page, and 15 of those pages would specifically be about the children, the DNA, the everything that came through with them, their presence in this world, the soul contract that they made to be able to come through that mother. That right there is the thing that you want on paper in a private side document. And now you don't want to reveal that. That's your ace in the hole. You never want to reveal it. Keep the private document in a safe somewhere. Lock it up. Make sure it's a fireproof safe so nobody can burn it down. And then with it, keep all of the addendums, amendments, keep a little journal in there that you use as minutes, or use the minute sheets that are provided in the trust documentation, and notate everything. You want to do this for you, essentially, not for, it's not for any reporting needs. If you can get yourself into a situation like that, where you have the trust documentation in the private, then we can create a public side, a public facing affidavit plus an abstract of the trust and a certificate of the trust existence, so that any letter that you write, and this is all going to be done through paper, if you're just talking to people, especially CPS, it's like talking to the cops. And we're not talking constitutional sheriffs who are actually after, protecting and serving and whatnot. We're talking about, these are entities that they were created with protocols specifically designed to traffic children. And if you don't believe that, just look at the evidence and look that they are the #1 child trafficking organization that there is. Obviously, that's a controversial statement, maybe, right? But at the same time, just look at how many children are taken away from their parents, and who is the prime culprit of that, right? And was there any kind of way to work it out in like an alternative dispute resolution process, which again, we put provisions and clauses in every trust that we have, where alternative dispute resolution essentially means you're going into a library, you by yourself, and maybe some professionals. And if you want to bring an advisor back, right? Bring them on board, somebody from the trust, essentially that, one of your trustees, bring them on board into a private reading room and hash it out, have a discussion. Know that every time that you have a discussion with these entities, it should always be towards settlement. The way that they get us is it's emotionally driven 99% of the time. And those emotions will dissect you. They will reveal all of your weaknesses. They'll let the lawyers that are getting billable hours know exactly where to, get those parasitic hooks in. Not, again, disclaimer, not all attorneys are bad people or parasitic, but the majority do lean that way. And they lean that way, if not consciously, they lean that way subconsciously, because the only reason their kids are eating is because of their job. So short answer, again, yes. Long answer, it gets much longer. But at this point, I'm going to, open the floor up again. Thank you so much for that awesome question. Yeah, very important.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's straight to the truth. Kidnapped by CPS, they are the child trafficking ring. And we hate to this kid's out there, man. But people are waking up to it anyhow. So it's disgusting. It's disgusting. The estimated average, and I'm sure it's far beyond this, but 800,000 children every year in the United States alone go missing. Vanished, gone. Where'd they go? I don't know. Why isn't it on the news? Well, I don't know. Right? So yeah. Beyond that, we'll go back to the open floor. It looks like we have a Rethinking Reality, Bobby Schluter, and I know Patrick probably had some questions. So if anyone is ready, go ahead and shoot or raise your hand or next in the queue. Janai, go ahead, darling. How you doing? I might have to unmute you.
Okay, I'm back. Thanks. Pressing buttons again. Listen, I just wanted to say that Gorilla had some follow-up questions if no one had any other questions, and a comment, but one of them was, can they attend the children a state school?
I'm sorry, please rephrase the question or repeat it rather.
Thank you. Yeah, I know what you meant. Thanks. So the Gorilla had a follow-up question and some comments in the comment, but one of the follow-up questions was, can the children attend a state school?
I believe that was included in the primary question. Sometimes I go left and right,
Yeah, I didn't know, so I was just reading it off the comments, that's all.
Right. So the way that they would attend a state school is essentially the same way that while they would never, shouldn't somebody from the Amish community want to attend a state school. That's their faith and the dictates of their religion always take precedence to whatever the school's policy is, whatever the state's policy is as well. So they would have to lean very heavy on religious exemptions. It would have to be something that the whole reason behind it would have to be motivated by something that was greater than man, right? And that is religion, essentially, where spirituality is often conflated with religion, and there's a lot of overlap at the same time. So your religion could be something as simple as, I make my kids hug trees for an hour a day because I know that the ancestors that are buried in the ground speak through the tree roots or whatever. It could be anything. You can get as elaborate as you want. It's got to be something that comes from the heart, so that if you were ever put on the spot and you ever had to explain, or rather they would request that you justify that behavior, you'd be able to do it off the cuff. You wouldn't need paperwork to do it. And it would be something that would be rooted in righteousness, protection, and at the same time, a bit of humility, because you know that, you know, if you approach them that way, you're much more likely to, you know, catch the flies with honey, I guess. I hope that answered the question.
Too well, brother.
I can only get better. Yeah, absolutely. Con gusto.
Open floor for anyone to go ahead and unmute and ask away.
Here, I think I got a good one. What's a common mistake people make while setting up a trust?
Thinking that they can do it themselves and get the same results as somebody who's been at it for 10 plus years.
Okay,
Yeah.
with that being said, what would be are there any risks associated with having a trust?
Yes, absolutely. Using it incorrectly, not following the instructions. Ideally, the trust documentation is the instructions. You read through it several times, you sleep on it several weeks, it becomes you. You will really grok it on an internal level where you'll start just operating through that. Might take time, you know, there might be a time lag in any given situation, and there might be a lot of A to Z process to get people from point A to point B, right? But at the same time, in a way, Carter, you can set up a trust and then you can act through it in a way that could actually amplify not only your dream, your presence, your love, your everything, and it can align you with the core vibration of love and service to others. Or you can set up a trust simply because you want to shield some assets and you can get that, you know, I mean, it is what it is. As far as liability goes, it's dangerous to do something that you don't know how it operates. It's dangerous to pull templates off the internet and then send them to people or whatever.
So that being said, how would it look if I had different properties and different assets in different states and or countries?
Okay, different properties. So essentially, how would it look? You're saying if you had trust documentation and you wanted to create a structure where you can hold these assets through different entities and have those entities essentially communicate back and forth with the trust, right?
Well, yeah, different states and countries, however that would look.
Different states and countries. Okay, every country is different. Every nation state is different. Most IMF countries and nation states are pretty much top down, have the same protocols, frameworks, you know, different languages and whatnot, different customs, but they all pretty much operate the same way. What I would do, say I had let's take a hypothetical example, right? In Uganda, for some reason, Uganda's government gets right, and I'm able to purchase some property in Uganda and keep it in that trust. So through that, I would just use the trust entity itself to buy it and purchase it and hold it and whatnot, and then use it to further probably an orphanage. Now, on top of this structure, though, let's say we've got 10 properties in the United States spread out in 10 different states. I would create 10 Wyoming LLCs to hold each one of the properties. I would make the trust not only the beneficial owner of that, but also the 100% controlling manager of those LLCs. And through that process, it would probably be that the trust would come on and DBA as something in order to be able to obscure its name, so that should there be any kind of like reporting requirements or whatever for, you know, who are the beneficiaries, who are the trustees of this entity, or rather who are the managing members, who was the owner, who created it, and so on. It would be through something that would be a DBA that would only become through a private trust, through careful documentation on the minutes side. It would be created out of thin air. And then that would be the entity with the EIN number of the trust that I would use to be able to create those LLCs. And then each one of those LLCs would hold each one of those different properties. Now, if you get very big, you would want a holding company up at the top. And then above that, the trust, right? So the holding company itself, then you can just create a system where all of those LLCs tap into the holding company. The holding company is the one that actually holds the equity. The LLCs hold all of the debt. And then you can have the trust be the owner of everything top down, because it is the 100% primary interest holder in that holding company at the top, right? Now you've created a structure where you have essentially a 508c1a religious entity, faith-based organization at the top, something that's no different from what the Catholic Church can do in reality, right? And it is a non-taxable, non-reporting entity. So now as soon as those LLCs get those notes cleared up, those promissory notes and the purchase agreements for whatever loans and credit was used to leverage to be able to get those properties, and as soon as those properties are free and clear, then what you're essentially doing is you're creating a system where you have a bunch of properties and you have a alloidalized title on each one of those. Now, it's a modern day equivalent of what an alloidal title would be. Alloidal title meaning it can't be taken from you. You can pass it down generations, even if you die, and it just sits there in the trust by itself. It can overgrow if that's what your intentions were. State can't come in because you didn't pay $19 taxes that year to be able to, make sure that you could keep floating the bill. So because of that, because these are non-taxable entities, that's essentially the way that I would create some kind of holding company plus a real estate venture. And obviously, brother, we can drill into this as deep as possible, but.
Well, here, I wanted to double back on one thing real quick. So you said those LLCs you would use a DBA, right? A doing business as.
Well, you would use a DBA through the trust would DBA as it, because the trust is named something that is a trade secret. You get it as soon as you read it. You'd really grok rye, right? But the trust then can DBA as thousands of entities through the course of its life.
Well, is that more so to obscure people away from the secret, or well, maybe I should say the privacy of the trust, or is that rather more for like accounting and because in that case if you have a DBA, it's not going to be the same name,
right? The DBA is only reflected on the minutes sheets of the trust, and then from there, if you want to create a public side facing document that mimics the original public side facing documentation, you would do it. You would just replace the grantor's name and the name of the trust with whatever the DBA is, and then you'd rock and roll as that. But you don't even need to do it that way. It could be an invisible DBA.
Hi, everyone. This is Scott. Oli, was that you just talking?
Mr. Scott, what's going on, brother?
Nothing. I just wanted to let everybody know about allodial titles, and it's the trust that the Native Americans have with the U.S. government and the interiors. It's actually why their lands can't be taken away anymore, because they have allodial titles, and not even God himself can take those titles away. So those things are set in stone. And so I was glad to hear that you're mentioning this, and it is the most secure and best way to own any type of real estate or land.
Boom, brother. Thank you so much for your comment. We really appreciate you jumping on the call. Yep. Allodial title is the way to go. That's what we're all shooting for. Where people often misstep is, again, ignorance. That's the only thing that's really going to create liability in this world that we're living in. And those paper entities were created out of ignorance through implied contracts that essentially just a signatory adhesion of the mother on the child, signing the child over as the employee of the corporation, the big corporation, right? So the only way out of that is essentially to, we call these manumission papers because of that manumitting vehicle at the core of the offering. And that is the thing that will not only free the land, it'll free the people.
Gorilla has a question. I'm going to read it. It says, well, it's not a question, it's more of a statement, but they're saying that by not doing these things properly, that's why these people are ending up in jail by listening to some of these gurus. We all know the names on here of who those people might be, which is why we don't take that risk. It's better to choose to work with people who do have the knowledge, like Yosi, to build these things out, because that's important. One wrong step, you're going to get in trouble, and it's going to be very, very big trouble. So, bro, Yosi, do you want to maybe express on, by not doing this properly, what type of trouble you can get in, or?
Absolutely. Years in the jungles and mountains in South America and working with different plant medicines made me very, very respectful of that. Medicine can have both sides of an equation. It can be used to harm, it can be used to heal. Magic is the same way. And anytime you're dealing with any kind of structure where you don't know what it is, but you're just taking some guru's advice, and that guru maybe might not be, thinking in what's in the best terms of you and your best interest, but only in their own advancement, right? They might not be in service to others. They might be in service to self. And then in this type of case, you've got them essentially experimenting on people, whereas our approach is more prudent. We use time-tested methods, things that have been proven over and over and over again. Experiential wisdom, right? That's way more valuable. Now, whenever you're working with any kind of process or you're hearing information, always check in with that heart space. And then if the heart space aligns with the gut will tell you first. It'll make you stomach turn, or it'll make you feel happy inside. We all have that inner bullshit detector built into each and every one of us. So whenever you're working with any kind of process that you don't understand, or know that if you don't understand it first, if it doesn't resonate within, don't even do it. And if you are going to do it, at least give it 24 hours to be able to really sleep on it, because we're working with black magic. If you're doing that kind of a process, where we're saying, no, white magic is the only way, right? We have to know every single detail of what we're doing. Otherwise, we're just getting mixed results at best. And like you said, and possibly ending up in a jail cell or worse.
Jail cells are not fun, by the way.
No, they are not, brother.
I second that.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. The gurus, especially with a few in particular that are, free, and people go about these routes and not realizing that they're getting caught in a giant fish net, and then don't know how to properly litigate a situation. To send somebody out in the field that wants to kill and don't even give them a gun. I mean, that's pretty much what a lot of these gurus are doing, and we're hoping to change that. We will change that. It's our mission to help the people that are on a blind path and following these goofy guys. And yeah, it's really something. It's really something. Oh, he's helping everybody get free stuff, or oh, he's helping. And it's like he's helping you with a prison sentence is what he's doing. You're messing with people that you don't want to mess with.
Right.
And
Absolutely. My wife told me something about paying a ticket. She said, essentially, if you can't afford the ticket, don't do the thing, right? But at the same time, if you can afford it, you could do 90 in the fast lane without batting an eye. No worries, right? So if you can't afford the ticket, and in this case, and what we're talking about right now, guys, is federal prison. There's federal prison, and then there's a liberation cosmology that allows you to be able to actually free yourself, free your dreams, no matter how, that path is always customized, and live in service to that dream. That is the end result. That's where we're trying to get everyone to. And I see there's another thing came in the message. I can't really read it right this second.
yeah, brother, it says, can you write a trust where my husband and I don't end up in court, but with an alternative dispute resolution instead?
Yep, absolutely. That is essentially the default structure of every single trust that we create. Is you will not end up in a courtroom, because you have a public facing document that says that the entity that has a similar name, or rather shares a name with the entity that they're bringing in there, that name on the named account, that because you share that same name, you can come in as a trustee of that trust, and then you're only there to balance the books at that point. From then on, it's an accounting issue at best. And that ADR provision is very strong. They do respect that no matter what. So yes, short answer, absolutely. Long answer, if you want to connect with us on the back end, we can go into we could dive as deep as you need. Absolutely, no worries. Our pleasure.
So I have a question. When you're up in front of a court, I know there's different courts and different levels of court that you may go to. Let's just say it's on a base level, maybe for like a traffic violation. Now you have your trust set up, and you go in there because you're acting on the public side, but you also are protected through your trust on the private side. Is there a way to initiate the conversation with the judge to verify that you understand their language, that you understand what's going on representing yourself?
Absolutely. If you're a traveling man, there definitely is. I mean, you just have to tilt one foot to the right, and you get what I'm saying. But if you're not in that structure, and you're just completely oblivious, let's say, to what's actually going on behind the scenes, there are many ways of challenging jurisdiction and presenting something that can require, simply because I'm brought in here as the name on the named account, but that is not me. And here's an affidavit to prove that's not me. And by the way, there's a trust that's named the same exact thing. And I'm here to represent the interests of that trust. And the name on the named account that you have has conveyed all interest into that trust. Now, from that point, now we're having a different conversation. Your Honor, I would really appreciate approaching the bench. Boom. Okay. If you can approach the bench, great. Now you're keep it to a whisper. The information that I have at my disposal could compromise the revenue stream of the court and would not look right on the ethical standing of this court. And I would rather approach you in chambers about the details. Now you can go into the chambers. Just have a talk. And when you're chatting in chambers, it's different. You'll see the judge most likely will take the robe off. That's a sign that, they're no longer in their official capacity. They're actually listening to you, and they will engage with you through that. So yeah, there's definitely a way on the public side to approach it. What I would recommend, though, especially in the case of a traffic type of thing, is that, failing to plan is failing to lose, and failing to have, or rather, you know what I'm saying, right? If you don't plan, you're going to get the result of not planning, which is essentially failure. And every time you go into a court, know that had you planned correctly and had you positioned yourself correctly, and you came in there with the proper capacity and in the proper agency, that it would go completely different from if you just went in there summoned as the entity that they created on paper. Now, both entities, same living person is being brought in there, but one of them has no bond required and is there simply to challenge the record if possible, but most likely just do a simple record correction, meaning this is who you're actually speaking to. It shares the same name. Now, before that, had you really positioned right, you would have gotten yourself one of these trusts and leaned on the agricultural exemptions that are embedded in it, gotten yourself a homestead through the financial technology that we offer inside of that, and then just get some farm plates and lean on that agricultural exemption. And then if a cop pulls you over, all they want to see is the certificate of the trust's existence, the fact that it's been certified as a homestead, which isn't hard to do at all. And then from there, you're rocking and rolling, because they're not going to give you a ticket. If they ask you for a license and you don't have one, you're driving a farm use vehicle. Now, farm use vehicle, you could be in a Ferrari with a farm vehicle if you know how to structure it. I need to use this vehicle because my trust, the people who I correspond with on a daily basis, they appreciate that I pull up in this vehicle, and I feel better in it. When I'm talking to them, I just feel better about myself. And when I feel better about myself, the trust does better. Now, from that, you just create some agreements with various co-ops around the country. Ideally, one in each of the four corners: Florida, Maine, Washington, California. And that co-op essentially says that sometimes you go there in order to be able to exchange services for goods. And that's it. Every co-op will sign off on that. And then anytime somebody stops you, you're on your way to one of those co-ops.
Yeah, so you're not on the road commercially at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you can keep the license. You could snip it up if you want. I wouldn't recommend it. We never recommend dissolving those public contracts. I mean, how arrogant is that? I don't even know how it was created. How can I dissolve it? Somebody else needs to dissolve it, if any. Otherwise, I'm just going to let it float. Let it burn if it needs to. But, I'm operating on this private side. And through that side is where I have all the protections. How do I know? Well, they're on this paperwork that I swore an affidavit that this is my will and testament. And it's all for my great-great-grandchildren's great-great-grandchildren's grandchildren. And because of that, you're living in service to something other than yourself. That passes the religious entity test.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. No. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So Yoshi, what are these services? Do you have a name for these services that you provide?
Well, we provide A to Z services on the public side. On the private side, it's a hybrid trust structure that's fully customized. And that entity right there is the core of a manumitting vehicle. I don't know if you were on the call before, but we went over a little bit about manumission, and that manumission was essentially the process that freed slaves, but it did it through paperwork. And essentially, you could be a slave in wherever, and if you had the correct paperwork, you were considered a free man. While the trust documentation itself is not enough to get you from point A to point Z with that, a little bit of dough and a way to invest in your dream, and possibly priority grant acquisition stuff that's embedded into the trust, or where you get it through a codicil, is something that would complete that process and make it so that it is a manumitting vehicle. Whereas essentially any debt that was accrued on the public side, you would just simply use the process to be able to rinse, repeat, discharge, and square that record off and be able to balance those books. So that is the system of enslavement that we're in. It's absolutely debt slavery. And debt slavery through indentured servitude, through those implied contracts that were created, and the insurance contract that's on each one of our heads. And it is a cash value insurance contract. That's why when you pay into Social Security, that's the only reason you get anything when you reach the age of maturity. It's just simply dividends on the back end. They're collecting a boatload when you expire.
Yeah, just like your birth certificate is a contract as soon as you're born.
Yeah, as soon as you're born, that is the major contract. It's an implied contract through signatory adhesion. It's your mother's signature on something that was essentially signing you up for something that she was never shown the other side of the contract. She was just told, like any one of us would be told, if we enter into any hospital right now, circa 2025, you go into the hospital, most likely, and 90% of them at this point, sign the digital pad. Well, what am I signing? I don't know. They'll straight up tell you, I don't know. It's not on my end. I can't see what it is. We're just asking you to sign it. Waive all your rights. Put you in the custody of the hospital, essentially, so that if you don't comply with their standard of care, you could even be detained if they want. If they want, they can detain you, throw you in a psych ward that's in the hospital. That's the kind of contract that we're talking about, is one that gives control over the living body through some kind of fraudulent means and an undisclosed structure. Right.
Thank you for that.
Of course, brother.
Yeah,
What's going on, brother?
for some of us that haven't got birth certificates and all, and there's some birth certificates that's been created out of nowhere, just something that's just been created and just don't know what it is, and our parent hasn't got any birth certificates, and we want to get a trust. What do we?
Okay, so no birth certificate. Essentially, there is a record, though. There's a record existing somewhere that has your name on it, and it has certain identifiers on it that link the living man, in this case, to the record. So what you're looking at is a record correction process. Even in the Department of Vital Statistics in the States, which is what it's called, but I know where you're at, it's probably something, it's different. We can definitely look up the name of it, and that would be the contact point for the record correction. And you would notify the chief record inspection specialist on that case. That's who the attention would be to. And you would tell them simply something like, there's a record that exists. I'm correcting it in this minor way. It could be simply that your ancestors had an accent on their name, and that accent didn't come through with the ID that you were given to represent that entity that was created. But yeah, even without that birth certificate and without that signatory adhesion, there's still some kind of entity that was created, right? They need to track all of their chattel. And by they, I mean, whether or not it's 100% a parasitic system, it certainly operates as it, right? So maybe, they, right?
Absolutely.
And yeah, and something created it so that it can track you, so that it can profit off of you. And that's parasitic.
Definitely has been profiting a lot. Even being put in the community service for a known contract that I've never signed, really, and just all them things just been having me confused. been rammed around and it's really confusing, really.
Oh, it is. It's a masterpiece of confusion and a maze of mischief that they've created for us. You know, just know that it's supposed to be confusing. And as you go deeper into that public side, especially the people who are trying to exploit it for free things, you'll see that the information gets more and more confusing. Now you need the codified instruction manual for whatever insurance provider is providing all of those contracts on those heads. And you need to dig really deep into it. And then you need, 30, 40 books to support it. And you're going to need possibly 20 years of study just to be able to get to a point where you can do something with it if you don't get thrown in jail by that time. So the public side entity that was created, what we recommend is just let it be. There's no reason for it to have any money in its bank account. Just operate through that church of one, that private side entity that you create, which is essentially it's a contract between you and your creator. It says that contract supersedes all man-made bullshit contracts that were created without your consent.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll come back.
Yeah, thanks for the question, brother.
Thank you. That did really make a lot of sense.
Yep, and I know that sometimes I go off, guys, left field, right field. I really try to hit those home runs every time you ask me a question and just give you my all. Like I've said, when I'm the most me when I'm not even here, when I'm not me, right? That ego identification trap is the demon that we're all up against. And as soon as we can do something to buck that and then live in service to something that's greater than ourselves, that's where the gold is. That's where, that's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow right there. I'm seeing that they made us all slaves with the 13th Amendment. Is that right? Is that what I just saw in that message? Mr. James, Mr. Oz? I can scroll through.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading. That says they made us all slaves with the 13th Amendment.
Right, because essentially what that paperwork did, what that amendment did to the Constitution, is it essentially said that while slavery as we knew it was outlawed, let's say, not really, because if you look at inmates on the side of the road picking up trash, they're not getting paid, right? So that's slavery right there. What it did was it created a system for governing slaves in a way where it would appear that slavery stopped being a thing and was a thing of the past. But in reality, what it did was it made you and I and any other living being that's attached to that public side contract equal to the dead artificial corporation that is created through paperwork.
Awesome. What about the 14th Amendment? Isn't the 14th Amendment not even, in place? Can you explain a little bit on that one?
Well, it's very simple. As they go further, the more amendments that you make to something, the more you dilute it. The more and that's done on purpose, right? So if you look at like the Black's Law, the first one reads like an etymology dictionary. But then as you progress, more using bullshit and word magic to be able to confuse us. So the further that you get along down the line, we have to realize that any amendment that's structured is only to amend something that was perturbed to be, it should have been in the original agreement, because our consciousness evolved in such a way where to me, it feels like it's more heart-centered. And then at the same time, there's more exploitation of that heart-centered evolution. That right there is the thing that obviates the truth, is that when you see all of the lies that are created through word magic, that's when you should really say, okay, I'm going to take a pause, because I don't even know what they mean when they say you, right? So that 14th Amendment in a nutshell is building upon the 13th, but doing it in a very sneaky way where, like I said, those corporate identities that are created are equal to each other. That's the only thing that was enslaved in the first place, because they had to create those contracts in order to be able to move their chattel from point A to point B. A slave owner had to be able to go to a bank and say, I've got 100 slaves. They're each valued at right? And I'd like to get a loan for whatever. So those types of mechanisms for encroachment upon our liberties and those natural unalienable rights, those types of mechanisms only get worse, which is why, incidentally, that it's so dangerous for people to be out there spouting off about stuff in technical detail that only a few have ever even delved into. because what it does is it makes it seem to the normie or to a neophyte like they can grok the material, and if they can't, they align with it, and then they just follow one step in front of the other. We're very trainable. So yeah, I'm sorry, brother, if I diverted from the original question. As we go along, we see that on the private side, it gets more simple. And it gets just very dialed in. And at some point, it'll just be a conviction that comes from your heart, and you'll know what to do in any given situation. But on that public side, you're going to keep needing to look at books, research, do all kinds of things, bang your head against the wall, trial and error, and possibly, like we've warned, there are dire consequences to meddling in that fiction.
Right. Yeah. No, I just wanted to understand further, because I know the 14th Amendment, is really just another way to keep people enslaved.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see, Gorilla. Yeah, Gorilla was talking about usury all over the place.
Yeah, all over the place. Yeah, the system is built upon usury, parasitic. It's parasitic at its core. And anytime you see something like that, where it's going to continue to mimic the living in order to be able to entice a living man or woman into signing them their lives over, essentially. Look at how many people are out here in service to money and stuff that can be created through just keystrokes. Really, really pay attention to that, right? If that's what you live in service to, you're living in service to something that is dead. It can never be alive. The best that you can do with any kind of resource, with any kind of asset, or any kind of debt that you can leverage, is leverage all of them in service to something greater than yourself, and then give freely without expectation on return, like we're doing on these calls. There's a reason why the Jews have stuff so dialed in on the financial end. That tithing is very potent. It's potent. You start giving away 10% of everything you earn, you're creating a bottleneck for a system where it can't penetrate your financial stability, because now you're creating excess need, and most likely you're giving to causes that support your community, which is the thing that we all need to be doing.
Yeah, interesting. Does anyone have any more questions? The floor is open. All right, Jeannie, go ahead.
Hi, guys. So I guess I just wanted to, listening to all this, it's hard. I don't understand some of the terminology, but as being someone who was kind of born, what I thought was free, right, with fairly hippie parents, just listening in on the call, and especially Patrick, when you were talking about some of the stuff you're going through, it's just real quick. I've had Child Protective Services involved and almost had my child taken away for absolutely no reason, just an argument with me and my husband where she was woken up. Not no reason, right? I take responsibility for all reactions, and I am in charge of me, so I understand that. And also losing a friend to COVID who had, no whatsoever in the hospital. We couldn't see her because we weren't her proxy, right? Being held against my will, being ripped out of my home, by 4 policemen without barely any clothes on because I was crying too much, and the neighbor called the cops because, I was sad. It's very apparent to me that I don't really have any rights. And listening to this, it's very, very scary. It has been very scary for me. So my question is, when you go into the hospital and you sign something and whatnot, if you have your trust and you're working, in the private under your sincere religious beliefs, this is how I got my daughter not vaccinated, right, for numerous things once I saw the damage that the few that I had, done had on her. I guess my question is, when you're in a situation like that, or you're taken to the hospital, does this trust protect me? Again, with my sincere religious beliefs, do I have to make it really, really clear, in the trust, what I do want, what I don't want, intervention wise and whatnot? It just was a question that just came to mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's called the medical directive. And where needed, we insert that into the trust and we embed it in the framework.
Okay.
And now in the case of somebody who is, let's say, they don't have one of these trusts, right? and they are in a situation where, let's say, their will is, it conveyed all of their interest to you, and you were the primary beneficiary of their will. In that capacity, you absolutely, should you have that actual will before they die and a copy of it, you can use that as a leverage point on the public side to litigate on their behalf for them to get the specific treatment they need, because you're the only person in this space that can identify and can speak on their behalf, because you've been given that privilege as either their executor or somebody who is capable through a medical directive. And again, we embed that in every single trust that we can. Whenever somebody requests it, we know that at some point you're not requesting it because of some future stuff. You might actually be intuiting into something that could come down the pipeline and that you might need one day. And we definitely respect that, right? So in that case, you would require litigation. You would have to go to court and essentially say that this person is either Amish, Quaker, or the way that we like to structure it is, I'm Amish, I'm Quaker. If there is any other religion or faith that is absolutely opposed to their standard procedure of care and their standard of care, then we lean on that. Right? Just the same way that I lean on, if it's whether or not it's common law or the state that you're in or the jurisdiction that you're in, it's whichever one is more favorable to the trust and the actualization of the thing that needs to happen, right? So it's always whatever's more favorable. And in this case, it would probably be, since you're in the States, it would probably be Amish. And I would say when incapacitated and in the care of a hospital and that organization, I am Amish. So essentially, do whatever you have to do to release me into the care of my first successor or my first heir or whomever I put in charge of my body. Let them bring me home and use whatever holistic treatments you can get your hands on. Tap into your network. Put a GoFundMe page up, get them tapped in with IV vitamin C, and throw the whole kitchen sink at it if necessary. But the traditional standard of care is probably, I suppose, that is the number one cause of death worldwide.
Absolutely.
Hospital, death by hospital.
Thank you. I agree with you. And I just wanted to know, like, following up when you said, here in the Northeast or in the States, it would best be Amish. Is there any way for them to dispute that, or they just absolutely can't on religious ground? Like,
on religious ground, they can't. I mean, you could have identified it a day before a date, and you can say specifically, I identify as Catholic when it comes to this point. When it comes to this point, I'm a Jew. When it comes to this point, I'm Hindu. When it comes to this point, though, as in being in the hospital's care, I'm Amish, or I'm a specific tribe of indigenous peoples that do not believe in their standard of care. And we believe more in connecting with the Earth Mother and the nature in order to be able to provide the healing wisdom. And if that not be the case, and should the person expire, you release them with grace and with appreciation for their life.
clearly. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course, sister. My pleasure. All right, guys, anybody have any more questions?
I'm looking at what Gorilla's asking right here. Let me just go off of that. Give me a second. Yeah. So she says, my father was murdered by their treatment during COVID. I'm furious about it. Good question. And can I sue them after the fact? They put sodium and potassium that should have been illegal. I mean, the potassium and sodium ratio would have killed a healthy person.
Yep. Yeah. Potassium and sodium are at the top of the pyramid with the elements. And that incidentally, that's why this culture leans so heavy on salt. Salt is the timeline. It is the time binder. It's the thing that makes it so that so that actuaries of insurance companies that have contracts on your head can essentially predict how long you're going to live and what's going on from there. So it's a method of treatment in a hospital is to drip somebody in a bag that's concentrated with sodium and doesn't have the potassium content to be able to balance that sodium out and provide the full mineral stream to the body. Ideally, they would be on fulvic acid or something like that. but instead you tap the main vein, hit them with the sodium, their kidneys are going to fail. We know the predictable process. It's just like when you go into a hospital with a tumor, the first thing they want to do is puncture the bag that your body in its infinite intelligence and divine intelligence has put all of the poison in a safe place so that maybe you can get to the point where you can fast and you can do some IV drip vitamin C or some kind of alternative remedy like a C60 or something like that, combined with herbs and a proper diet to be able to shrink that thing. But instead they puncture it. And then ironically, not so much, right? We all know what's up. That is where their timeline starts. So they have predictable results and they have a predictable protocol for being able to guide someone through that process of death once they puncture that bag and do a biopsy. So from that biopsy point, just like from the point of the, needle goes into the arm and they're dripping sodium into you. And they're essentially creating a system where you will die, your kidneys will fail, your organs will shut down, they will have to pull the plug, but they'll do it in a slow, methodical way, just like certain attorneys would do, where, they're just essentially clocking billable hours at that point.
Yep. She says, or they say, sorry, I have a tumor. They wanted to biopsy, and I said no. So
that's the way to go. Yep, that's
right.
The way to go. Seek that alternative treatment. If it's below, if your tumor is less than about 3 centimeters, I think, you can go ahead and you can get cryoablation surgery which is essentially just freezing it, allowing the body to take over, treat it as foreign matter, and dispel it from the system. You can do that in many countries. Here in the States, there's probably an exorbitant price if you can even find a practitioner who could do the process. But now if your tumor is over that, say something like 10 centimeters or whatever, you want to shrink it down. You want to get yourself in touch with a phlebotomist in your area. You want to make sure that they can get to the point that you're at least 2 to 3 times a week. And then you want to order online some ascorbic acid, vitamin C, up to 30 grams. Now, anybody who's ever overdosed on vitamin C because they're trying to cure a flu or a cold or something like that, or just jumpstart their immune system, it comes with a lot of diarrhea. There's a lot of mess that comes with it. But the thing with and that's simply because the stomach acids can't process it, and the body can't process it as well as they can intravenously. Now, intravenously, you can handle 30 to 50 grams. And the culprit behind the tumor itself is actually a fungus. And that fungus has a yeast. Yeast is the foundation, and that's where the parasites infest. That's where the fungus grows from. The fungal overgrowth is manifested through the bloodstream and the vascular system as a tumor. And that tumor can be shrunk through natural means. It might take a long time, depending on how big it is, depending on what your diet is like, depending on, your state of mind, whether or not your liver is compromised. If your liver is compromised, you probably have a lot of anger going on, and that anger would probably then need to be resolved first. If your kidneys are compromised, it's probably fear, and that fear would probably have to be resolved first. But fortunately, the creator gave us an amazing mechanism for essentially just going through and defragging the system, defragmenting the biological hard drive, right? Vipassana. I would highly recommend yoga, Vipassana, breathwork, movement accompanied with connection to the breath. That's the best thing right there. That remedy right there, plus some herbs and spices, will get you on the path. And then if you're too far down a certain path where you're not sure of what to do and you feel like everything is lost and it's all taking over, including that tumor, then you definitely want to go on a fast. Ideally a dry fast, but get there incrementally. Start off with something like the master cleanse, lemon, cayenne, like 180 if possible, but 90 will do, and some grade B maple syrup, and just drink that as much as possible to be able to sustain that fast and sustain your body during that. And even though maple syrup is a sugar, it is a sugar that is bioavailable. It's not like a glucose or sucrose or some kind of sugar that's man-made, which is essentially the thing when it's refined, that and salt are the things that feed tumors and tumor overgrowth and fungal overgrowth and whatnot. I hope that somewhat addressed it. I do realize that there's a lot to this, guys. And that's why I definitely encourage everybody on the back end, go back to the Trust Medicine People homepage, listen to it again, even if it's just while you're doing some dishes or driving in the car or whatever. We try to drop that knowledge so that you can preserve it in posterity for the future.
That was correct about the master cleanser. I've done it many times. I try to do it, a couple times a year, but it is those components that are put in there are there for a reason. Not just the maple syrup. Not only does it have the sugar, but what it is, it's mineral enriched. So the minerals are really the stuff that really sustains you within the master cleanser. So you have the lemon, which is going to clean the gut lining and the intestinal walls and the cilia. It will get those receptors not sending the wrong messages to your brain, because when those receptors get clogged, and it's sending hunger hormones, because it's not that your body wants more food, it needs more minerals and vitamins. So it tricks itself to eat more. And then what happens with the cayenne pepper, it stimulates the saliva gland, so it curbs the appetite when you're on it. I can go 20 days, no problem, doing the master
problem.
cleanse. No
Yes,
problem
sir, no
at
problem.
all. No problem. When I did it the first time, my first 3 days, it's like, what am I doing? I haven't eaten in 3 days. And then once I got past the third day, the magic happened. It really happened. And I was waking up without alarm clocks. My vision got better. My hearing got better. Even my sensitivity of my hands got better. It definitely reboots the whole body and definitely can purge those parasites, as Yossi was saying.
Jeannie, you have the floor. Go ahead and ask her your question.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you. Yeah, Miss Jeannie. Janai.
Janai, sorry.
No worries. We're all learning.
Janai, then Patrick.
Yeah, my mother's been struggling with diabetes for almost 16 years now, and just been looking into it and just can't really seem to get any good idea. Just people.
Diabetes is a very simple cure. It seems absurd on its surface. It's a fruit fast, brother. Fruit fast. Eat fruit.
Fast.
Eat natural, organic fruits. Fruits are essentially just consolidated liquid sunlight, and always approach the system that is structured on inversion and the inversion of reality in such a way where when they tell you, and you see from their peer-reviewed studies, that sugar is the thing that is the primary thing that feeds diabetic, the progression from A to Z. No, that sugar is also the cure. And now it's a cure only because if in the sense of fruit, brother, fruit is the cure for diabetes, a fruit fast.
Absolutely. Definitely have to get her onto it because she's got type 2 diabetes and she's on the insulin and
Yeah.
pills.
You have
And
to
it's
wean
just,
off that. You got to wean off.
Yeah. I really
Yeah,
have to. Don't like seeing it, like just taking whatever Big Pharma gives her and just every idea they're putting ahead, and it's just really sad.
Yeah, and we get scared. We are, we like to say they, but in some instance it's us. We are they. We get scared. We get scared, and when you're scared and you're in fear mode, you will just comply with whatever the quote unquote expert tells you to do. Like Scott was mentioning, the master cleanse is a great way to start. She can't just go right from eating steaks to eating fruit. If you eat fruit after a steak, one takes much longer to digest in the bloodstream and in the body and in the intestines than the other. And if you follow it in the wrong way and you do the food combining in the wrong way, well, now you've got essentially sugar that is in the system. It's putrefying because it's trying to work its way through the steak. And that right there creates a mechanism where it has no other way to go except for extending through the vascular walls as alcohol, or there is a technical term for it, but essentially the sugar does convert itself into alcohol And then that in the bloodstream amplifies the presence of the underlying dis-ease, right? So yeah, I would definitely recommend that master cleanse. Great place to start. Master cleanse plus just a little bit of yoga and some breath work. And feel free to connect with me on the back end. That is breathwork is a service that I offer pro bono to everyone that I work with. And that's the master key right there. If you can connect with your breath and you can learn that breath is spirit, and that is the primary thing that sustains you. It's not food, it's not water, it's not even air, it's breath. And breath is very different from air, right? These are two different things. You can be connected to the breath in the middle of Hong Kong on a smoggy day, and you can still get that sustenance from the prana that's in your environment. So it's a tricky one, filled with many layers. But anytime you're trying to heal, or anytime you're resonating with being healed from something that's taking over your body, it will be a tricky process. You'll first have to, go through all of your psychological baggage and unload it, and it will be painful. And I think Scott mentioned about the parasites, right? With the master cleanse, the master cleanse combined with now I know that Dr. Stanley Burroughs, the genius that essentially just gave this to the world, this master cleanse formula, that thing right there is very potent, where I think it could be, and I'm not going to be arrogant enough to say go ahead and expand upon it, because the master cleanse in its own right is something that is very powerful as a remedy that can cure disease. It is a curative formula. But then add some wormwood, black walnut hull, and clove to the mix. Drink it as a tea. Even if you have to boil it down into a shot, drink it as a tea. From the tip of the tongue to the, where it comes out, those parasites will be absolutely infuriated. And if you use that formula right there, which is, I think, Dr. Hulda Clark developed that formula. That formula right there is really powerful for parasites, and it will expel that urine from the parasite. Urine is essentially the thing that is responsible for most detox symptoms, or the thing that we would say is a detox symptom, like a headache or feeling lethargic, or, sleeping all day, or whatever it is, nausea, diarrhea, all of it, just expelling parasites.
Yeah, it's the urine that's really toxic from the parasites, because the more they're starved, they will try to urine more, but you just have to go through that phase. And coming off the master cleanser, they do suggest that you induce orange juice afterwards, because your intestines are really they're almost not collapsed, but they're so thin because there hasn't been anything going through. Especially a 10-day fast is what I recommend. Minimal is a 10-day fast with the master cleanser. And coming off of it, 3 days of orange juice, and again, yes, you will get diarrhea, but you're inducing your body with a bunch of vitamin C.
Absolutely. And I think the term is permeability, I think, of the intestines and the intestinal structure, where it becomes very flimsy, let's say. But the hardest part of the master cleanse isn't the cleanse itself. Like Scott was saying, you can go 40 days plus and not bat an eye and be like, whoa. At that point, your whole reality has changed, because you recognize that you do not need food to survive, and that there is something greater than yourself that sustains you. At the same time, coming off of it is dangerous to a lot of people, because those cravings, if you don't address that parasitic issue at the core of the illness, the coming off of it can be disastrous. People can get intense cravings, and then they can follow those cravings with stuff that isn't good for your body at all.
That's an important word that you use. Yes, coming off the cleanse, it can be dangerous, because you should start out eating slowly, broths, very softer foods, vegetables, I would suggest, before you start eating meat again, if you're a meat eater. Definitely. That is because your intestines can actually kink if you put too much food in it too quickly. So coming off of it, you have to be very careful. take your time with it and just know that it's just part of the process of fasting, not just the fasting part. You should be mentally prepare yourself 2 to 3 days before you do a fast too, knowing that you're going to be doing that. It's those things they helped me out a lot, and it made me feel comfortable. And I was guided through someone, but there is a book, and it's the Master Cleanser book, and you can read that, and it goes through some stuff, and it has some religious undertones, but the actual science behind it is right on point.
Absolutely, brother. Right on point. The science behind it is sound. And yeah, if anybody wants to get an introduction to fasting, go the Master Cleanse route. Once you get more advanced, you'll go to distilled water. And then once you get more advanced from that, which the distilled water essentially will bring you to a point where you're dry fasting. And I wouldn't recommend anybody do any kind of dry fasting unless they've worked themselves up and it's an organic process where your body has prompted you and spirit has prompted you to go on a dry fast, right? But dry fasting itself is possibly the most powerful remedy, which tells you something about the infinite intelligence of the body and how it was designed to essentially just burn that poison up. The dry fasting is the thing that you should be trying to get to, where you're dry fasting and just simply doing a lot of breath work. And if you can get into that space, 1 day worth of that is the equivalent of 3 to 4 days on distilled water, which is the equivalent of 5 days or more on the Master Cleanse. But yet still, everybody should start with that Master Cleanse, especially because, like you mentioned, with the salivary glands and essentially interrupting the food receptor, the thing in our brain that says, oh, I need food, right? That parasite that's communicating and hijacking the control panel and saying, more food, I'm hungry. But if you're really hungry, you'll feel it in the back of your throat. And if you're on the Master Cleanse, the best way to tell whether or not it's time to come off of it, simply look in the mirror, do like that, put your tongue out, extend it, look at your tongue. If your tongue has any whiteness to it, you're still going. But if your tongue is nice and pink and or red, then you've probably reached a point where the Master Cleanse has taken you to its limits. And for each of us, that's different. Like Scott said, I would definitely recommend 10 days minimum, and work yourself up to it. Don't ever set goals. The best way to go into a fast is, I'm going into this for spiritual edification and for some kind of cleansing of the temple. And if you go into it like that, then what's going to happen is naturally meditation will occur. You'll be in states of meditation. You will feel that freedom of what it means to be without the pull of food all the time and without that parasitic influence in your life. And then from there, when you come back and you start refeeding it and feeding yourself, whatever the diet is, like Scott said, maybe it's just organic fruits and veggies at first. Preferably fruit at the beginning because it's astringent, it's easy to digest, it's got a lot of fiber, lots of vitamins, lots of minerals, consolidated sunlight, and so on. And then if you are a vegan, it would probably be best to stay away from the broth. The broth will, if you do indulge in some kind of flesh and you eat meat, some kind of broth, like bone broth or something like that, would be highly beneficial to the system during the come off place. And make sure that whenever you're coming out of any kind of cleanse that you're doing or any kind of fast, whether it's for spiritual reasons or you're just trying to tune the body up, make sure that the coming off of it, the breaking of the fast, is probably the most essential thing. And it's the thing that's going to train your willpower, which is incidentally the ultimate thing that will guide you to your everything that you've ever wanted in life. Is just making sure that you can flex that will. And the best way to do that, guys, is cold showers. Cold showers. And you don't have to do the Wim Hof method. You can just simply go take a hot bath and enjoy yourself. And then at the end of it, turn the shower on completely cold. Stay in it as long as you can, even if it's only 5 seconds at first before your body prompts you with that, like, deep breath and I can't catch my breath. Eventually, if you keep doing it consistently, consistent, correct practice is the thing that you get to that point of perfection with. And the best point of perfection that any of us can ever have is adaptability and the ability to essentially say, I accept my limitations. And because I accept my limitations and my weakness, I turn those over to something that's greater than me. Hey, whatever you are up there, whatever name I call you by, or whatever you are down here or within, please help me with this. Give me strength, give me patience, give me insight so that I don't break this fast too soon. And when I do break it, I do it responsibly and I do it methodically, and I'm very aware, right?
Yes, and there's also not just a spiritual aspect. I do love quantum physics, so I am a science guy also. But there was a study in Nature magazine that stated the people that live the longest, even whether it is mice, primates, humans, whatever it may be, those that eat the least live the longest, because that is eating. The digestive system takes so much energy. It's just an unseen energy, but the less you eat, the less your body works. And so that's
Yep.
the whole premise behind the less eating, living longer, because you're giving your body a break.
Yeah, less is more in this case, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. The less that you eat, the more that you're giving that digestive system a break, the more that you're learning to sustain the life that's within you off of the substance or substance is probably anything less than the breath. If breath is at the top of your food pyramid, you're good to go. If right under that it's fruits, you're going to live a long time, especially if you make sure to supplement, because supplement with minerals always, guys. Simply just order some burdock root, some sea moss, and some bladderwrack. That provides the full mineral spectrum right there. Make a tea of it and drink that tea every day. And what you'll find is that there's a vibration, an actual vibration that you can feel inside of your body. And you'll be able to tell that, as Scott mentioned, minerals are the source of life. We are electromagnetic beings. If the minerals aren't balanced correctly, then your whole life will be out of bounds. It'll just be completely out of whack. But as soon as you start to balance those minerals from the top down, and for some of us, including those of us who are diabetic, please consider abstaining from salt in any form and anything that resembles a powder, because those things are completely destructive to the endocrine system and to all of the systems inside of the body and the infinite intelligence. And not only that, but salt itself is possibly the primary culprit of diabetes or any kind of sugar imbalance, because the salt will essentially wick up the program. Dr. Emoto did some work where he showed that you can program water, where if you hold the water to your chest and you even think loving thoughts, this whole structure of the water changes. Now, if you speak to the water, loving language, that water changes into something that is loving and will sustain you. If you scream at it and yell hate at it and you just completely unload on it, if you looked at it under a microscope, you would not want to put it into your body. You'd rather drink some gasoline out of a pump, right? And that's the truth, guys. Water is the primary thing that we hold, that holds the program, and that program is influenced heavily by electromagnetic frequencies. Most of them we are not aware of, and most of them are on a frequency level and vibrating at such a pace that they're destructive to the entire organism and everything that we touch from then on out. And salt, if you notice, salt was used by medicine, by when my wife and I were in Colombia for a little while. We stayed in a little village called Taganga. That village was right at the base of the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta mountain range. And up at the very tippy top, I mean, you could be walking on the beach in this area, in like Palomino and the surrounding areas, and it could be 100 degrees and you're sweating and the ocean is hitting you and you're just like, whoa, I'm in paradise. And then you look up and there's a snow-top mountain right at the top of it that's structured. It looks just like a pyramid from the right beach. Now, the Kogi, who are an indigenous people who inhabit the areas up in that snow-top mountain, they will actually utilize salt as a medicine to be able to carry fresh water from the top of the mountain all the way back down when they need to make trips into the city or they need to make trips to the mainland. And the reason they do that is because they know that along the way from where that snow melts off and it drips back into the ocean, that bacteria in the water, they're going to get diarrhea. Diarrhea is lethal to most people in the third world, unless you have some kind of treatment, right? So they know better. So what they do is they load their bodies up with a small amount of salt, and it works really well because they usually abstain from salt. They don't salt their foods or anything like that. They'll take a pinch of salt, put it under their tongue, drink a bunch of water, and then they'll head down the mountain and they don't need to carry, right? So that's the positive side of what salt or sodium chloride in its rock form can do for us. But at its negative side, I don't care if it's pink, yellow, white, Celtic, from the Himalayas, it doesn't really matter. If it's in a crystallized form, expect what a crystallized entity would give you, which is essentially a program or some way to lock in or be a programming tool for water. That at its core is the reason why anytime you're doing any kind of healing, and also incidentally why the master cleanse works so well and why distilled water fasting works so well and dry fasting, is because you're abstaining from salt. That is the from my research and researching my own body, that's the thing right there. Salt is what sets the clock. That's why we die. Essentially, I do honestly believe that without salt and the influence of salt on our culture and all the cultures that the master culture has come in contact with, that without that influence of salt, people would be living a lot longer than they are right now.
Yeah, thank you for all the health tips, Yoshi. I think it's important. I didn't realize that these are some of the things that this meeting talks about either.
Absolutely, brother. Yep, it's not just about trusts, right? It's we are trust medicine people. So medicine is anything that connects you with the natural world, some deep part of yourself, and essentially the nature that you're a part of, and the great spirit, ideally. So that could be breath work, that could be taking a walk in the woods. It's not just about plants on this end.
Yeah, tricking your body to doing things that aren't normal. I went on a hike today. I live in California, and I walked up the hill, but when I come down the hill, I walk backwards, and it reprograms my mind, and it creates new neuron pathways to help me protect my psyche, to be happy and healthy, and just see things in a different perspective, and it just reprograms your whole neural system. So not doing things the same old way all the time, sometimes it's good. And I often tell this to people, that say, I need to do this, or I want to change. I tell them sometimes, you're not going to like what I have to say, because you're going to have to do the total opposite of what you're doing to achieve change in your life. And sometimes that's what it takes. You just have to really not conform to too many habits. Anything in abundance can create, what's the word I'm looking for? Complacency within the body, and it gets comfortable. That's why we
Absolutely.
change up things. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. And anything that's done in a repetitive form, consider that a parasite. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Miss Janai, are you having trouble unmuting your mic, or are you just being polite?
Well, earlier I was, thank you so much. I'm usually not that polite.
Yeah, you are.
I'm a straight shooter, but
You are a straight shooter. Absolutely.
yeah, generally, if I can think of what my thoughts. So I started talking last time, but I actually was muted. So I was going to say it is Janai. Thank you, Yossi. But we all are learning, and thank you so much. It matters not who I am in a certain respect. Regarding the master cleanse, a lot of people, including myself when I used to do it as a kid, drank salt water in the morning. I forget how many days. I know I did it again in my 20s.
Once every 3 days.
Yeah, okay, every 3 days. One cup
Yep,
of.
that's to purge the intestines of any
Correct.
kind of decaying fecal matter.
Yep, correct. Yeah, fully, like, the function is great of the salt water, and I understand that what you're saying is not, necessarily related. It's related to memory, and I'm very waterlogged right now, and feeling very parasitic. So I get what you're saying. It's like I'm holding on a lot of old patterns here, and So firstly, I'd just like to ask if anyone, feel free to message in the comments, or Yossi, you were mentioning you don't care what kind of salt. But as far as the master cleanse goes, I've always leaned on Celtic sea salt, right? In small
Celtic sea salt would be the one.
Okay.
Ideally, like when my wife and I were in alone Ecuador, and we spent a couple years there, really living in the dream. We would actually, I'd swim out as far as I could. I'd gather a jug of sea salt water and of ocean water. We'd bring it back to the room that we were staying in, or the apartment rather, and we just very low, just keep it, first bring it to a boil, and then just very low, just dissolve it. And
Gotcha.
eventually it would turn into like a grayish type of material. Now, we're not sure if that grayish was because of pollutants in the water.
Right.
Ideally, we should have gone out into the deep ocean, right? But I can't swim that far. And she wouldn't let me, even if I could.
I'll do it
Right,
for you.
but
I'll go
right,
disappear.
exactly. But what we found is that salt was less addictive, more. It provided more quality, and it made it so that we could actually detox from the And when you're living in the third world, what you find is that while seemingly you can get the same products as you can in a grocery store in the States, it's not that way. So the pink Himalayan sea salt, or the Celtic sea salt, it'll say that with fluorina, fluoride added to it, right? So it's always bullshit. It's always something to be able to feminize men and make it so that women can't do the thing that they can do, which is, I don't even want to speak on that right now. You get my drift on that.
Yeah.
Right? That sea salt is best if it comes from the deep ocean. So essentially what we're looking at then, if we really want to derive the most bioavailable sodium and the full mineral range from that, we just go to the plants that grow in the deep ocean and then just consume them. Make a nice mineral soup, right? With the burdock, the sea moss, the bladderwrack, and any other kind of seaweeds or whatever you can throw in there. And then, dose with some phytoplankton or something like that. You won't even want salt. If you live that lifestyle long enough, you won't want that rock stuff. You'll see it as the program.
Yeah, I think my question, I totally understand. And I'm a kelp, kind of girl, or, I grew up eating seaweed and raw fish. And I used to collect seaweed with my dad, like limu, in Hawaii, we have limu salad, with everything, and different varieties of seaweed. But I like what you're saying about the kind of the alchemy of ingesting like the salt from where you're at. I think my question is if anyone knows, because there's, again, I don't trust anything that I see online, and everyone's going, oh, Celtic sea salt is tested to have a lot of lead. And my question is always like, okay, organic or inorganic, or
we have a bead on all. We've done extensive research, and I've been at this longer than I've been at drafting trusts.
Right.
So drafting trusts is something that came about 10 years ago. This is something that came back when I was 17 years old, right?
Yep.
So it's
me too. 16. Let's go.
Yes, ma'am. So we're approaching 30 years in this space, and this is my real passion.
Nice.
So yes, my partners and I have absolutely dialed in a list on the trustmedicinepeople.com website. It'll be launched probably later this week. At some point within the next few weeks, we will have a store that we add onto it. And that store will have all of the thoroughly vetted items that you would need for not only the master cleanse with the Celtic salt and all of that, but a whole wide array of supplements and minerals and and different healing techniques and things
that's one of my goals as well, because I've worked in health food stores since I was 16, and I'm 50 years old now, and listen, I've sifted through a lot of garbage, and sometimes I probably sold some garbage, right? Unknowingly. When I was younger, I sold a lot of garbage thinking that it was good, so the Celtic sea salt, I'd be interested to see, if you still think that's the tried and true. I feel good on it. There's always chemicals in the environment. We breathe them in. But I think like what you did with the salt there in Ecuador is alchemizing some of these toxins. We can't live in worrying about the toxins, in my opinion, is part of the disease, is part of the illness. And people who obsess over what they eat, I mean, I'll tell you, the other night, I haven't eaten Spam in 30 years, and I'm a very sympathetic, mostly veg, some, organic local meats and whatnot, whenever. But for the sake of it and memory's sake, I made my roommate a Spam pineapple pizza, and I had some leftover Spam. I ate it with a shit ton of ferments.
Right.
Right.
There you go.
And and
Yeah.
greens and stuff to like buffer it. But the main thing as I was eating it is that I don't care what's in the can. I know there's some nitrate. I'm not going to, I know because I've read ingredients my whole life, but I'm happy.
That's it.
Right?
That's what I was just going to
Truly,
interrupt you and say.
Yeah. I mean, I
Right?
felt you.
Is
I
that-
feel you. I feel you.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're happy
It's
while
under
you're eating
what
it,
conditions are you eating, right? Because when I'm eating fast and I'm lonely and that's disease, even if I'm eating collard greens.
boom,
Right?
absolutely.
I mean,
Even
you
if
can
you're doing the master cleanse, if you are miserable, your
Oh.
body will be that.
Right. Stop and like recalibrate, which is, I'm really having trouble gearing up to the cleanse. And I guess before I did it, I had the salt question that if Celtic was still on your radar as one of the most, that you feel is the best, I guess was my first question. And then Scott, I just wanted to tell you, and also that I just like what you were saying, and I find a lot of that is very true. There's a mindset above everything, and doing things like brushing my teeth with my left hand to balance the hemispheres of the brain, and becoming a yogi where you're looking at all of these Buddhas. And my daughter asked me when she was younger, like, Mom, why is the Buddha like so fat if he's always doing his exercises?
Right. Because he's eating rice.
Well, it's funny because when she was even younger, my aunt gave her this like kind of like I love God kind of la Jesus is king, like CD, which I totally let her listen to because whatever, right? Because she's a kid. And it may not have aligned with, music I liked, or philosophy or whatever it was saying. Long story short, she asked me, what's the difference between, Jesus and Buddha? And I said, well, they're the same, but if you look at pictures, then Buddha's fatter. Anyway, my point is balancing the female, the male, right? The longer one meditates, the Buddha always has like tits,
Yeah.
and a belly.
No, tell me about it.
Right.
Listen, as a man who's who came off of a 10-day Vipassana sit and spent 6 months just connecting in a yoga space, focusing completely on breath work, doing a lot of dry fasting. I'm going to tell you right now, a man needs to work. A man absolutely needs to be doing something every day that furthers the goal of him and his family or his tribe. That is absolutely necessary. What a woman needs is probably the opposite, right? And in reality, what a woman really needs is other women to connect to that are close by, non-judgmental, a way of venting frustrations, and then, a sisterhood to be able to prepare meals while the men are out on hunting parties or gardening parties or whatever it is that they do. Now, to speak real quick to the point of, well, how do you get started, right? And when there's so much ambivalence and there's so much hesitation and so much resistance, how do you get started? And it's very similar to how would you jump in 40-degree cold water? You definitely wouldn't go up to it if you knew it was that cold and just tip your toe in. Because as soon as you tip your toe in, now from the toe to the top of the head, you're freezing. You're probably shaking. You're shivering. You're not going to jump in that water. But if you just go dive in, what you'll find is that when you come out, your body will, with the blood alone that flows through the body as a response to that cold water, will reset you, and it'll reset your nervous system, and it'll make it so that you start to get hot. And that hotness, that thing that happens inside as the blood flows through the veins, that thing right there is the thing that'll make you jump in again and again and over and over and over again. And once that becomes just as addictive as the parasite or whatever is preventing you from jumping in the water, that's going to be your path. And when it's your path, it's going to be your spiritual path, and you'll align with it. And you'll see that in reality, you don't need to teach somebody how to meditate. All you need to do is tell them to stop eating. And that process right there will bring you to meditation eventually, especially if you have some proper guidance with the breath work.
Yeah. And I like that cold therapy. Just, I know Patrick has a question, so I'll make it brief. I come from a land of, when it's 60 degrees, we are freezing,
Right.
the ocean is always warm, right? So I'm in the East Coast now in Massachusetts, and I swim in Nantasket Beach, 3 hours at a time. I go way out. I don't come back. I scare lifeguards, and I'm not always swimming because I'm a little overweight and injured, but I'm floating, I'm stretching, I'm I'm taking my time out there. I'm looking for sharks, whatever I'm doing. The cold water, I had to build my way up to it. But, again, Wim Hof is just borrowing from that Tomo that you were talking about, and
correct.
that's just, monks warming themselves in the snow like Wim Hof does with their intention and their breath and their visualization. And
Correct. They
just
can
back
put
to the healing part, the
yeah.
visualization for me, despite all of my injuries, and I shouldn't be walking, the visualization, the intention, the cold shower, the doing things that are uncomfortable, it really is. And for Scott, doing things in reversing it, right? Walking backwards, training your brain and balancing hemispheres so that we can all become the yogi. You don't, people, all of my girlfriends like, I gotta go to yoga, my butt is getting too big, and I'm like, that's not, yoga's not an exercise, and all
No,
the Buddha
yoga is
fat
yoga
and
is movement.
hooves. Right,
Yes,
because he is
is movement
balancing
with
the
the breath.
divine feminine and masculine, and in the same
Yes,
way
ma'am.
with the cold and the hot, and it's all about, it's not about like intermittent fasting every day and then I do this all rigid. It's about flexibility.
But at the same
Right.
time, right?
Like mental
while
flex.
you're 100% correct, notice how many women have an aversion to cold water, and you'll
Yeah,
see
true.
that, right? And you'll see that there is something there where what you're speaking to with the masculine and the feminine. Cold water is definitely a masculine thing. It's a thing to whip the will into shape. And once the will is whipped into shape, a man can do anything, because under the will that drives him, he can do whatever is necessary. A woman, on the other hand, doesn't. The cold water is simply for detoxification purposes and to get the blood flowing. For a woman, cold water is going to be much more of a actual medicine than it would be for a man, even though it helps the man control his will and build it and so on. For women, it's I suspect it's completely different, and from my observations, it's completely different.
I'd say I'm probably masculine enough not to have noticed.
It's all good. You're balanced.
Like you're like, women need women, and I'm like, yeah. And after a minute of that, I get real tired, and I want to go smoke.
Right, but a lot of women do.
That's right. Yeah.
Right, a lot of
Dynamic
women do.
creatures. Yeah, these are just generalizations, but
Yeah, generalizations. We're talking
Thank
about
you.
dynamic creatures that are very on all sides of the spectrum, and nothing that is for one archetype is the same for another. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to these biological bodies that we're in and the chemicals that flow through them.
Yeah. I think anything, honestly, with the cold, you take a girl from Hawaii who's, when I first put my feet in Nantasket, my whole body cramped, and now I've worked my way up to, after 5 years of living here, little by little, 45-degree water up to 20 minutes without a wetsuit. I do shiver on my way home, but I'm still working at it, right? I'm still working at that relaxing in the cold. But thank you so much, you guys. And I'm going to sign off and let Patrick ask his question. Thanks, Yossi.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Yep, go for it, brother.
Oh, just wanted to appreciate Scott and you, brother, and for just giving me a bit of deep dive into what mum needs and what is there out there, and to sort of tackle what she's got and what she's been dealing with. It's just really, just woke me up on so much, and possibly been overthinking myself a bit too much too. And just the information that you just ran through really did help a lot. And really just got me a bit of a confidence to sort of see what's out there, really.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
I'm not alone. Yeah, I'm not alone. And
alignment first, bro. That's where it all comes through. And as far as anything that gives you confidence, follow that, because that confidence will bring you wherever you need to go. And just know that you do have a support system here. I know that this is your first time on the call, but every Saturday, every Tuesday, we do the same thing, same bat time, same bat channel, and we just chop it up towards spiritual edification. And while the trust paperwork and all of the A to Z offerings that we have are at the core of what we do for a living, at the same time, this is our passion. And this is the pro bono service that we offer, as this is just our offering to everybody. And yep.
I was gonna get in touch with you based on some of the stuff we sort of touched on, and we really appreciate it to get a bit of a time, and really whenever you got time, and just really appreciate that.
Absolutely, bro. You can actually, this is recorded. I don't know if Mr. Oz is still on the phone, but if you could please reach out to Patrick and schedule a time for a consult. Mr. Patrick, we definitely appreciate to talk with you on the back end about some of the specifics and see what we can do to help your family and help you get to wherever it is that you feel you need to be.
Yeah. Well, also, the name Patrick was the one that I was supposedly given
Got it.
by them.
So this is your real name. How do you pronounce it?
Paquet.
Paquette. Boom.
Paquet.
Way
Paquet,
more potent. Way more potent than Patrick, brother.
It wasn't Patrick. It's what they given on what they put on my visa. The one that got me here in Australia, and I was really confused and didn't know what it was. What was the purpose of giving such a name? And don't know the reason behind it. Still confused to this day.
Yeah, well, if that's something that's on your mind, and that is something
has been
that
for a long time.
Oh, well, you follow the right path back toward the center, and you're going to get all of the answers that you need. If something's been on your mind for a long time, or if you've had your dream for a long time, or just something that's tweaking you on the back end, we can definitely help you chop it up and figure out what it is, dissect it into its parts, and then come up with some kind of path toward, toward you really being able to understand or understand rather what your actual name means. On top of that, you mentioned you don't have a birth certificate, correct?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Right. So your name means even more than it does to those of us who are documented properly as chattel.
Right. It's always been Bucket.
Okay. Beautiful.
Just sort of came along, and it's just getting called Patrick, and it's just really looking around like, who are they trying to talk to? Like, who are they talking to?
Yes, sir. Yeah, feel free to connect with us. You can direct message either myself or Mr. Oz here, and we'll connect you. Miss Janai, you said I saw a chat come up, a message here. Would you like to have something to add here?
Yeah, just really quick. I was going to ask one question, but now another's come up. So the first question was regarding Shilajit, and we can talk about that at a later date. Again, maybe more in private message. I don't feel like keeping everyone, but Paquet.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, no T,
Yeah.
silent T. Okay, cool. You brought up something very interesting because although I wasn't born in a hospital, I got a birth certificate, but my mom lied on the birth certificate and gave me the last name Ocean instead of Vieta, which is my father's name. So Yossi, is there any complications with that then? If I'm really I'm a falsified person like that Paris Ocean, who's supposedly my father, doesn't exist.
Now listen, any perceived liability can be leveraged, including a debt, in order to be able to create a lot of some kind of asset or something that's beneficial to you. And in this case, the fact that it doesn't even resemble the actual last name of your ancestors and your ancestral line means you are a prime candidate for a record correction through the Department of Vital Statistics, where we just correct that record. And we would do it ideally with a trust document, and that trust document would then be the structure and the bones of the entity that you lived through from here on out.
Okay. And I'm assuming I'd also have to get an official divorce and drop my Arabic hyphenated last name.
You can, or you can't.
You don't have to.
Listen, the only entity that was ever involved in a marriage contract, because I know you're not coming to us with one of these trusts, is the entity that was created on the public side. And if that entity was fraudulently created, or there needs to be some kind of record correction at its base root, that record correction will follow every single other record that was created from it.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah.
And thanks, Peke. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
No worries. Nice to meet you too, Jenny. It's really interesting how still go back and see how, I don't know, it's really different for us really, and for mum not really going to school and such, and paper to her was just like, what's this? Just chucks that, and yeah, never worried about that. Like, really not really from where papers are made, really. Like, what is it that we got to do with such a things like as a paper? Yeah, she just never think to her. She couldn't read it. She didn't really know what she was signing to, I suppose, too, and she never got any explanation behind it. Never borrowed it much.
Yep, that's that implied adhesion contract that's going on behind the scenes. They're never going to give you an explanation. And, you know, should you be in a situation where you're indigent or you're an Aborigine or you come from a different culture where you're not required to have a birth certificate, or, you know, you were born in a bathtub, and, you know, any one of those situations, and there are countless others that could lead you to a point where you were born outside of the system, and then as soon as the system gets some kind of bead on you, they create that contract unilaterally. And now those unilateral contracts are the easiest ones to dispute. Any kind of record correction process, first, it can't be held against you. Any of the record that has been disputed or corrected can never be used against you to be able to cause you any kind of harm, or used against you to be able to leverage that as something other than what it is, which is essentially just a complete fiction. And then on top of that, you know, if a record correction process that's pending and then you don't hear any kind of response, that's fine too, because often they won't give you a response. All they'll do is they'll correct the record on the back end. The system that is governed through paperwork. And as long as your paperwork is correct, as long as you've disputed the records, and record corrections is the primary thing that you want to do on that public side, especially if you create a trust and that trust is named something other than the record on the public side. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I still runs through my mind as well, because English isn't really my first language, and I've come across English when I was just 13 years old. And
You're doing an awesome job.
just
No, you
really had to.
communicate intelligently, and listen, as somebody who can speak fluently English, which is just a business language, I'm telling you right now, I lived for 8 years in South America, and my Espanol isn't anything. I'm serviceable at best, you know, taxi driver, turn left here.
Yeah. I barely speak English at home. I really don't. This is my time. I'd speak English at home. Like, for 16 years, I've learned English and still learning it, and don't really know if it's the English itself, really. But I've never spoken it at home. I don't really speak it at home. I just don't really have time for it. But
What is your native language, bro?
Kibembe.
Say again.
Kibembe.
Boy, you're gonna have to spell that out in the chat.
I can do that. I can write that in the chat.
What part of the world do your ancestors come from, brother?
They're from the center of Congo.
We are very connected to that continent, and you know, if the work that we're doing is successful, and any measure of success that we have can be measured by the African continent, and you know, the vast wealth that is in that space right there, the you know, the sheer robber baron just exploitation of that region. I genuinely feel that with the projects that we have coming up and that are in the pipeline, and the partners that we're connected to, that perhaps, you know, you might actually resonate with some of the projects, that we can actually really make a difference in that region to really empower people. It's so easy to help people from that space, because we realize and we recognize how little they have in comparison to what we have. But what we find is that the help that we can provide is only rice and corn and things that feed parasites. Whereas if we were to empower people, on a real level and empower the entire African continent, it would look totally different. Clean water, Berkey systems, on-demand DIY, keyhole gardens, agroforestry projects, orphanages, etc.
My heart just jumps every time I hear that. It's one of the amazing things I've I've heard. I barely hear that around. Jenny says daughter's part of Congolese. That's awesome, Jenny. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, nice beings out there. I couldn't ever take any other people being bad as such, or being any sort of way. Or African people, as I see them all, they're just really appreciative people, and for what you're doing there, it really shows. Really, we're just one.
We are one. I used to say when I was between the years of let's say 17 and 22, I was in a rough space, and in a rough neighborhood too, in that rough space. And I had to really learn how to survive. But then what happened through that is I learned to thrive. And one of the most important things that I learned was, if I'm hungry, there's a soup kitchen right down the street. Don't get online, go volunteer, feed people. If you're hungry, feed people. That's the number one thing that you can do to alleviate hunger, is feed
Right.
someone else. That's the world that we're in right now. We are spiritually in a totally different space than our ancestors were. So we really need to crank it up a notch. And the more giving that we can do, and the more that we can identify those who are less fortunate than us, and we can give unconditionally to them without expectation on return, but then also recognize that we're in a unique position where we are educated enough to know, be hurting. That's where the power of the dollar comes in. Because when we send donations off to Uganda or South Africa or the Congo or wherever it is that we're supporting some orphanages or some sustainable community, we're always doing it from a place of, this dollar right here goes toward that water cistern and all of the stuff in it that's needed to filter it. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, this dollar goes towards keyhole gardens, not corn, right?
Really, really powerful. Yeah. I still got families all around it, and even in Uganda as well. I don't really see myself being here, living here. As much as I love it here in the West, and home's always got to be home, no matter what. I think I could make a difference there as well, for what knowledge I've learned and what I've actually learned here, and it's really helped me in the long run, really. But home is always going to be home, and I think we could do so much better as beings there back home.
That's your foundation right there. That's your foundation. If you build upon that
Absolutely.
foundation, right,
Absolutely.
and you live your life in service to something greater than yourself, and into the dream of helping your people and helping those who are less fortunate than you, you will get everything that the universe is possibly capable of throwing at you. And a lot of us have blocks when it comes to what we deserve. What we deserve is specifically a result of the karmic imprint that we put on the world, right?
Yeah.
So that which we project is what we deserve. That which we give is what we receive.
Yeah. Oh, it's what really runs in the blood, really.
Yeah.
Thrive on it, and it's just what always run in my head. Like, love it here so much, what I'm going through and what I'm learning and where I'm at so far. But I know I will be at home at one stage, and that stage it'll come, and I'll be there. I'll be helping the people, the motherland, really.
You've got the language. Honestly, you have the English language captured right there in that statement, more than 99% of native English speakers. I will be helping, not I'm trying to, or one day I'm going to, or any of that nonsense that obscures us from the real reality, right?
No,
I will be helping.
I will
It's the
be.
same thing with healing.
Yeah,
Yes, sir. It's the same thing with
absolutely.
healing. Rather than saying, I am healing this, I am healed. Resonate
Yeah.
with I am healed. You'll get to that space much quicker.
I really just, appreciate it. I appreciate the day and the whole life, and just can't really can't really wait for more of this, and just to learn and be able to get more understanding.
Absolutely. We appreciate you more than you could possibly realize. Like, honestly, everybody that comes into this space is unique. We're all given that fingerprint for a reason. The fingerprint is a reflection of the heart print. The heart print is the thing that we're trying to wake up in everyone, reflect it through some kind of paperwork that can make you actualize your dream.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, brother, for sharing so deeply and being so engaged in this conversation. We genuinely appreciate your presence here.
It's just been a great experience. Everyone's just really been engageable, and so easy to communicate with, and I just feel, I mean, I'm within a family, and that's
Yeah.
how I should be feeling, like I should ever be feeling ever since. But to get this right now, it's just, yeah, really have made my day, and it's just made me more confident. I've got a massive family behind me, and just somewhere to look forward to every time I come here.
Yeah, absolutely. Every Saturday, Tuesday, feel free to jump on and treat us as family, because that's how we treat you. You know, we are tribe. We are one.
That's how I saw it since the first minute of it. It's amazing. I love it.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we appreciate you all of your presence. You know, even if you can't speak for whatever reason, you know, we don't know if you have a generator running in the background or you have a baby screaming and all kinds of stuff. But, you know, just keep sharing those questions, keep jumping on these calls, and, you know, at some point everything will click, and at that point you'll take over and you'll navigate the dream. And, you know, each one of us is the 100th monkey, guys. Each one of us has the potential to actualize our heart print and really manifest something special in this world that can help everybody. So, yo, I see Mr. Oren jumped on. Oren, do you have any questions, bro? I know you've got a couple. I didn't mean to call on you, bro. If you're not in a space where you can speak. Okay. And Mr. Bobby, I see you're on the call. If you'd love to chime in, do it. If not, you know, feel free to just hang out and be a lurker, and all is well. And we really appreciate your presence too. And if anybody else has anything to add, or any questions, or any things that they want to dive into, that would be awesome. If not, we're approaching the 3-hour mark here. And yeah, all is well. Feel free to ask the questions within probably 3 to 5 minutes. If no more questions come in, we're going to end the call. Mr. Tony Oz will wrap it up, and we'll see you next time.
Whereabouts in Uganda?
Yeah, we're working with an orphanage in Uganda. We're going to get them off corn, off rice, off sugar, off everything that feeds the parasites. We're going to get them some parasite remedies, and we're going to get them into a space where they can be a self-sustaining community, and that orphanage can take on tenfold what it is right now, because there are a lot of children that really need a home. And we've heard a lot of sob stories. I've you know, personally listening to these stories and connecting with the gentleman who runs the orphanage and Mr. Oz's connection with him, and some of their stories that have come through with that. Boy, you know, those tears can be transformative. And right, and when they're shed from a space of, you know, where it's real genuine and you connect with these people, we really realize how fortunate we are. And I'm just so grateful for my life and the opportunities that creators bestowed upon me, and the space that I'm in, where I can be in a position where I can share with these people and help empower them to a better future. So I see that there's a Mr. Bobby. What's going on, brother? Or sister? I don't mean to assume.
It is, brother. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah, I actually got a new laptop, and this is my first setup like this. So this is my first time checking out the mic.
Awesome.
But yeah, I wasn't really expecting this call. I just got your notification like right as I was starting. So I really wasn't thinking about it, but it's been on my mind. I just haven't really had it as a top priority. But I was really impressed with this call, and looking forward to kind of getting into that a little more. I didn't really come with any question.
Oh yeah, no worries. I'm sure you'll have them as the days and the weeks go on. Just feel free to jot them down in a notebook and then bring them to the discussion. You know, we're more than willing to freestyle if we don't know the answers. We do have a tech team that can help decipher that, and I can also do research into any questions that you have that I don't have the immediate answers to.
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of, doing my own research in the background, just kind of like not a high priority. And I can really kind of tell your knowledge base is really impressive. So I'm already impressed with your whole initiative here. Do you have any influence or connection with NACO and Medicine for the People?
Medicine people?
Yeah.
No, not a direct connection. We do. My grandfather was, or my great grandfather was the conductor of the New York Symphonic Orchestra. People who are close to me sometimes get annoyed because I drop them a lot of music through the YouTube channel and share a lot of stuff, right?
NACO's like top of my list.
NACO's up at the top of my list too. I definitely do appreciate medicine music and stuff with good heartfelt stuff, but no, the Trust Medicine People was built out of the connection between the trust that's our core offering and that we are medicine people. You know, we recognize that medicine is anything that connects us to our creator and ourselves on a very deep level, and the nature that we are inhabited by, right? So through that connection, obviously we're going to resonate with folks like NACO.
That's amazing. Yeah, well, I can tell you, just with my lineage, Uncas was a sachem of the Mohegan, who is like my 10th great grandfather. So I've got a lot of that kind of in my blood. And I ran into NACO kind of going on a deep dive to try to find people of that influence and see what they're doing, or what their conversation is. So it's probably kind of something that brought me to you guys.
Yep. Are the medicine people that's in the Trust Medicine People, that bit right there, that's actually born out of medicine ceremonies where we would actually sing a song that we are the medicine people. And while I'm not going to embarrass myself and sing the full song right now, I'll let you know that, with the proper plant spirits in place, and it's a catchy tune, and it's one that your voice just loves to vibrate because the resonance alone is transformative. So we are absolutely the medicine people, each one of us. Anybody who stayed on this call for close to 3 hours, now exceeding 3 hours, is obviously resonant with the message, and you are the medicine.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that at all tonight, so that was kind of a nice surprise, actually.
Yes, sir.
But that's all. I just kind of wanted to just say something because I felt like you guys had so much good stuff there.
You're awesome. We really appreciate you on the call.
Yeah.
Thanks for saying something. Okie dokie. Mr. Oz, are you present? I see Dennis, you briefly unmuted. Now you're unmuted. What's going on, bro?
Yep, I've just got back.
You just got back. You got a lot to listen to.
Yeah, it looks like it. I couldn't believe it's still going.
Yeah. Go to Trust Medicine People on the YouTube channel, and you'll be able to get this full recording. And then Carter on the back end, we'll definitely chop it up and put it into bits and shorts for public consumption.
I really enjoyed it, Dennis. Thanking you.
No worries at all, bloke. I thought you might like it.
Oh, well, I really have.
And then, Mr. Dennis, you do have trust paperwork, brother. Are there any questions that you've had after? I'm assuming you've read through the trust a few times, and I know that at sometimes it can be quite confusing, but that the more that you read it, the more that you grok, and that the more that you grok, the more that you are it. So if there's anything that we can do to help you really get the most out of the offering, please feel free on these open mics to bring this in. And know that, this is that free space. This is the space where, you get to just bring all of your questions to the table. I'll stay on this as long as I need to, guys. If we're doing 5-hour sessions, I can handle it. I might need a day to recover, but we can do that. And then, if for some reason you have something that's a little bit more confidential and personal that you want to discuss, feel free to schedule a consult. Mr. Oz would be glad to put you on the calendar.
Yeah. Well, I've still got to have that meeting yet too.
Yep, schedule it. You know, you have to be the one to initiate it though, right? We're not chasing you down. Initiate it.
Well,
Know that there's no time limit. Whatever's going on, we can always find a solution. Solution might not be something that is prescribed. Usually 90% of the time it's custom. So, you know, whatever we can do to help you and help you get the most out of the core offering that we have, please do your best to reach out and get booked on that calendar so that you pop up on my phone and 30 minutes beforehand I go, woohoo, I've got a consultation with Dennis. I've been waiting to speak with him.
yeah. I want to sort something out with the agricultural plates and whatever I have to do with that part of it. Get the car on the road and that.
Yep, it's pretty straightforward, brother. You know, I'm not going to drill into the details right now. I don't want to bore anybody. I know everybody's been very, you know, we've all stayed on this call for a while here. And if you do have specific questions about that, you can bring them to the surface. If not, let's you know, do that consult. Get on the calendar, bro.
Yeah. So I'll have to leave that with that one with Tony. Like I've let him know, and he said he's just going to organise something, but yeah, I haven't heard anything yet.
Okay, yeah, he'll reach out to you. Yeah, we're still trying to get our calendar in place. We've had some minor tech issues lately. We are migrating over to a secured server before we launch the website, and that's intentional. You know, just like we tell everybody, we'd rather that you have the solid foundation and launch pad built before you try to fuel that rocket ship, right? We don't want it going sideways into the ocean like all the rest of them.
So there is a couple of things that probably need to be changed on my trust as well. Just a couple of things that not right on there.
Yeah. What we can do, bro, is we will through that consult. What you can do is highlight everything that you have a question about on the, you know, ideally you'll print a copy. That copy will be highlighted. There'll be notes all over it. There might even be blood, sweat, and tears on it. But know that you get me that copy back. You take pictures, you send it back. I'll make the adjustments after we have a consult. Obviously, some of the legalese needs to remain, but as far as nomenclature and the specific way that things are said and versed and so on, we do want it to reflect your heart print as much as possible and as thoroughly as possible. So yeah, all of the input that you can give, all of the corrections or the suggestions that you have or otherwise, please notate them, bring them to the discussion. Get that consult booked and we'll go from there.
Yeah. And I think I mentioned this to you one other time with the super fund. Now, would you put the super fund into that trust or you'd leave that just separately?
Okay, so when you're talking about super fund, what are you talking about? Elaborate a little.
It's like when you go and work for someone and normally you get a certain amount taken out of your pay that goes into super. Does that fund, do you know what I'm talking about there now?
Yes.
Now, would you keep that separate from the trust? Because, like, you know, you're putting probably all your property into the trust. What about the super fund?
Well, the only time, and this is where certain people, certain gurus, and a certain specific type of information that's been spread to people, ideally because, you know, it could possibly help them, but most likely just because it's addictive. People love free shit, right? So the super fund that you're talking about is equivalent to the cash value lending window that's associated with each one of the peoples in the United States who are leveraged as chattel. All of the insurance contracts that are on their head have a cash value lending instrument attached to that transmitting utility. And that cash value window that's the thing right there that you pay into over time when you pay into that quote unquote super fund, right? And that is incidentally also the thing that can be used to discharge debt. You're not going to get a check from a treasury department without any kind of liability associated with it, right? But you may be able to, if you position yourself correctly, you can absolutely use those credits to be able to discharge that debt.
Yeah, want to be able to Yeah, I'm not sure how all that works, but anyhow, I guess I'll learn as I'm going.
Yeah,
And
that's
also
more my
now,
job
Bill,
than yours, brother. But the thing that we
yeah,
really like to do is insulate people from all of the technical nonsense. And, you know, if it weren't something that was aligned with my passion and my calling, I would steer clear of any kind of legalese, and I definitely would steer clear of people telling me how to get something for free that was owed to me, right?
all you really want to do is, which makes sense to me, is to zero out those books, the accounts that run up to into a bill or whatever you'd want to call it, is
Correct.
to
Yeah.
zero them back out.
Yeah, zero them out. What do you need that money for? As long as there's no liability attached to you, the living man, that's the
Ex-
only thing that you're really looking for, right? From there, you've got it. I know you. You've
That's
got it.
exactly. That's all I'm looking for.
Yeah, zero out the accounts, do the accounting, you know, make sure that you come in there in the proper capacity, proper agency with a great cover letter. Know, Dennis, that I will help you construct that cover letter, refine it, and we'll also connect you to the different departments that you would need to send it to be able to put them on notice.
Yeah.
Yep, just let me know when you're ready to rock and roll with that. Get on the calendar, bro.
Yeah. Well, I have let Tony know, and he said he'll book in as soon as possible. So I'm guessing he'll just make a time.
Yep, he'll make a time. We are, like I said, we're migrating over to a more secured server. We don't want no one from our tribe to ever be in a situation where their information can be hacked by, you know, some third grader in China at this point, you know, who could just essentially hack into a Google server and pull it off and then use that identity to be able to create another identity and travel wherever and charge up things and cause a lot of havoc in your world. We're not about that. So we've made sure to secure a server first, and then we will get you on the calendar. We don't want any of your private information exposed. So that's why we're being so careful with this. And that's why the time delay and the lag.
No, it's fair enough. So do have another question. Well, man, I got many, but there's another one I got here. Like to where you keep the trust itself. Now, like normally you just probably, in a filing cabinet or something at your place. But what do you recommend to do there with that?
For what specifically? Where the trust has an address, you're saying?
Yeah, where to keep it, that it's where it's safe to store it.
Okay, so where it is safest is go pick yourself up a fireproof safe. Keep the private trust documentation, the trust agreement, the 30+ page agreement that we wrote for you. Keep that in a fireproof safe, along with everything else that's attached to the trust. That's the best bet. And then the trust is wherever you want it to be. Now, the initial address, that is the mailing address and the physical address of the trust, can be relocated at any time just through documenting in the minutes sheets that I've attached and the record of minutes sheets, change of address. On the record of minutes sheets, you just do change of address. On the minute sheets, do the change of address, describe it just a little bit. Hey, I've changed my address to this place because, you know, my buddy John has decided that he's going to lease me for free in perpetuity. You know, he's got 100 acres. He's going to lease me 5 of them. So I'm going to use that address and those, or if the address doesn't exist, I'm going to use the GPS coordinates in order to be able to denote the physical address of the trust. And then from there, your mailing address can be a post office. It can be anywhere you want. It could be a McDonald's if you can receive mail there.
Yeah, right. So you just have the wherever you're going to sort of keep the trust, that's the address that you use.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because like I was thinking, I've got something set up at the post office, which not a lot of people do. Most people go and get a post office box, and then that costs you. But what I've done is I've just got my mail going to the post office, and I just go in there They know who I am. I pick up my mail if I've got it addressed to there, but it doesn't cost me anything.
Yeah, that sounds like a good bet in your case, bro.
So yeah, I don't know anyone else that does it actually, but I do it, and I've been doing it for years.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yeah, make sure to book that calendar appointment with Tony and keep on him. You know, he's a busy man nowadays. So Mr.
Yeah.
Oz will connect you to us. We will have a consult within the next week to 2 weeks, preferably, you know, closer to that 10-day mark. But, you know, come prepared with all of your questions. Be prepared for the rapid fire consult that's on the other end of you getting your trust documentation. We will have Carter record it and then send you an AI transcript of a summary, as well as, you know, any notes that you might need and a checklist of an itemized checklist so that you know point A, point B, and, you know, point C, and so on.
Yeah. So like on the trust, I'm thinking I could ask this question. That you've got it in Roman numeral numbers. Is there any reason why you've sort of done it like that?
Yeah, in my classical education, I was trained in computer science. I know essentially how to create a document with the Roman numerals at the top and then the subsets with the ones and the zeros and the capital A, the lowercase a, and so on to be able to denote some kind of list. So those are just simply articles, brother. And those articles, that Roman numeral nomenclature that we've used for the articles is because, you know, if I just did article 1 through 24, then legally through that process, if I were to then, you know, do points 1 through 24 on each one of those, it wouldn't necessarily be able to be mapped out correctly. So because of the mapping of it, we have to make sure that our structure is in place and that the hierarchy is present, and that's why we use articles with the Roman numerals.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Anybody else have any questions? If not, if Mr. Oz is present, maybe you can close out the call.
Yeah, no, I'll leave it for now. I've got to go and do other stuff, so that'll be it for me for this time.
Thank you for your presence, brother. We really appreciate you. Okay, guys, Trust Medicine People weekly Saturday Night Live open mic meeting of the minds. Officially, this discussion is adjourned. 19 Central Standard Time. We really appreciate all of you and feel free to come back on Tuesday. See you same time, same bat channel.
No
Peace
worries
and
at
love,
all.
guys.
No worries. See ya.
See ya.